United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Bonzal,
Here.
Commissioner Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Hanley,
Here.
Commissioner Mayer,
Here.
Commissioner Stonehouse.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hill,
Here.
and Mayor Smith.
Here. Commissioners, we have an agenda here in front of us. Do we have a motion on this agenda? Commissioner Stonehouse?
Your Honor, I motion to accept the agenda as written.
And do we have a second? Commissioner Davis?
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion on that? All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
All opposed, please say no. Motion passes 7-0. We have no announcements this evening. That brings us to public comment. Members of the public wishing to address the commission may approach us at the side podium over here. You've got 3 minutes. Please state your name and physical address. Anyone for public comment? Going once, going twice. Public comment is now closed. We have 2 items this evening. So first we have consent agenda. Do we have motion on consent? Commissioner Davis?
Well, before I make a motion, I'm just wondering if the city clerk, if you would look at the, I don't have a page number, but under the supervisor's labor agreement, it says there was a motion and a second, but there was no vote, and I'm wondering if we're missing that or if I'm missing the process.
It's my recollection that because we did not take a motion.
We did vote, Madam Mayor.
Oh, that is correct.
The
Commissioner
motion
Davis,
failed.
that,
Two.
I don't want to blame technology, but
But you can if you'd like.
I do have, if you, 1 second, I can address it, but I do have the notes from that. You're correct, there was a motion. There was a motion to, so the first, yeah, that was it. It was 5-2. It was just discussion and then a 5-2 vote.
2 in favor and 5 against.
Yeah, it was 2 in favor, 5 against, correct.
Okay, well, I think, Kyle, that we caught you in your first mistake. First mistake.
Caught me in my first mistake.
I would like to move to approve the minutes with the correction that the supervisor labor agreement was, the motion was denied 2-5. Would that work for you?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
And do we have a second on that amendment or motion to amend the minutes? Commissioner Hanley?
I second that.
Any discussion? All right, so we are amending the agenda
The minutes.
as stated. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, please say no. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Okay, our main item of the evening, we have budget overview. So as I understand it, we've got 4 separate sections we're going to review this evening. We're going to see how far we can get through on the budget. If it looks like this is going to take, if we approach 6:30 and we're still rolling, we may decide to take a recess and come back. If we feel like we can get it in around or before that point, great. If we feel like we need to schedule another meeting, then that would be something we would have to do. But we've got 4 different kind of sections we're going to run through, and after each full section, like the first is components, I will run through the commission and ask for any questions or discussion. If you have a clarifying question, like what page are we on, or I'm sorry, what was that number, feel free to chime in, but anything longer than that, wait until the end of each subsection, please. Okay, I will go ahead and turn it over to our city manager, Karen Kovacs. Thank you.
Thank you. So, you know, as it was mentioned, we have kind of 4 sections to go through, and the order that we are approaching is going to be running through the component units, moving into the general fund recap, which is revised from the previous meetings, and then moving into fee schedule and talking about water and sewer rate structure. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Mary to discuss the component units that we still have outstanding.
And actually, I'm going to end up passing the buck right to Andrea from the Peter White Public Library. She's going to discuss the budget for the Peter White Library. That is going to begin on page 31 of your budget books. Welcome. Thank you.
Good evening. First of all, I want to thank the City Commission for continued support of the public library. Some things coming up in the next funding year will be on the ballot November of 2022 for Marquette and West Branch townships. I'm trying to get everyone on the same renewal schedule, but it's tricky because each of our townships have a different number of years that they want to renew their contract. As far as revenue goes, we're projecting essentially flat revenues for the next year. In my opinion, that's not such bad news. In addition to our regular funding sources, we have a $20,000 National Endowment for the Arts Big Read Grant. Programming for that grant starts at the end of this month, and the bulk of which will take place in October. State aid continues to be funded, and as far as we know, there aren't any foreseeable changes to that. We continue to watch penal fines. They are trending downward. You can see from a look at library funds over time, we're down about $20,000 from when I started at the library, and that's just an ongoing trend. So we continue to watch that. The Michigan Library Association continues to keep their finger on it too. And I'll be interested to see how much, if any, long-term impact the pandemic has on those funds as well. The library endowments continue to grow. We've budgeted for the past several years to take a distribution from our endowments. So far, we haven't needed to do so. I anticipate in funding year 21-22, we will need to do so. We've budgeted $5,000 for that. Our development fund general endowment sits at about $450,000. It's our long-term goal to get that over $1 million so that we're able to take about $50,000 in annual distributions. And we're actively fundraising to get to that point. Our fundraising efforts include private sources and designated donations, and those tend to generate about 10 to 12% of the library's operating budget. As of July 2021, we've raised over $280,000 in our development fund. That's the largest fundraising year that we've had thus far. Our Friends of the Library continue to generate funding using the bookstore revenues and online book sales, and they will have their first in-person book fair, our book sale, at the end of September. It's in conjunction with the AAUW, and we hope it'll be a successful event for both organizations. On the expenditure side, the library board made several changes to our budget this year. Most notably, our staffing wages continue to be the largest part of our budget. It's also the most important thing that we do is offer high-quality staff support. Long-term, my concern with the library's budget is keeping up with competitive wages. I know that's a concern of all entities at this point in time, is how do we keep up with that with relatively flat funding. We have cut prime time out of our budget this year. Michigan Humanities Council is no longer funding that project. And so we decided to not bring it back for 1 year with the funding running out the next year. We will run a Primetime Inspired program for preschool this winter. I don't know that it'll keep the name Primetime, but it's inspired from that program. As far as other revenues go, we continue to try and pay down our MERS pension liability. We have moved all new hires onto defined contribution as opposed to defined benefit. And long-term, that will help the library's budget. In short-term, it means we're paying into 2 different MERS accounts, which I'm sure you're all familiar with the city process, and a lot of different organizations doing that. We continue to put more funding into digital resources. The challenge with this is that we still have to buy all the physical copies. So we're doubling up on formats to be able to offer the streaming services. Our usage continues to be strong despite pandemic challenges. And this last couple of years, especially in the last year, we've had to add a lot of expenditures into safety for staff and patrons. And for the past several years, the library board and administration has been focused on rebuilding the financial stability of Peter White. We've made great progress in this endeavor. And as we move forward, we'll continue to offer the best library services to our community within our budget. I thank the City Commission and staff for their support, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Andrea. I appreciate it. I think, I guess with the component units, maybe we need to talk about how we want to do that. How many different component units are we going through? Just want to make sure. 4 different component units. Any questions for Andrea? I know I said we'd wait till the end of the section, but I also don't want to keep her hanging on. I didn't think about that in advance. Commissioner Davis?
Just one quick comment, and that is congratulations on 280,000 raised in the endowment fund. That's really a wonderful number.
Yeah, we have a lot of really strong donors.
That's great. Thank you, Andrea. We appreciate all you do and your staff does.
Thank
for
you
the
so
city of
much.
Marquette and beyond. Appreciate it.
And then we're going to go on to the DDA, and Rebecca Finko is going to come up and present a quick DDA budget.
Oh, it's supposed to be.
Yes.
Just kidding.
That was on the handout, I'm sorry. There was an additional handout for this one.
Good evening. My name is Rebecca Finko. I'm the Executive Director of the Marquette Downtown Development Authority. Thank you for having me here today to discuss our DDA budget for the 2022 fiscal year. That budget was approved by our Board of Directors at our July 29th special meeting. As a brief review, the DDA is responsible for the economic vitality of downtown, as well as increasing property values. We engage in public improvement projects. We facilitate property investment through grant funding. We manage and maintain a variety of public spaces. We manage the parking and maintain the parking downtown, and also sponsor a number of events and promotions, including the Downtown Marquette Farmers Market. Our authorized positions include myself as the full-time executive director. We have a full-time promotions and events coordinator, and recently promoted our operations and parking manager to full-time as well. In addition to that, we have a part-time farmers market manager and 2 farmers market cashiers, a part-time office assistant, a full-time maintenance coordinator, and 6 maintenance staff. And as part of this budget, the DDA board has also authorized the hiring of an assistant director, so that position has been approved but not yet hired. I will skip our 2021 accomplishments and our objectives and initiatives for 2022. I will be back in October for my annual presentation, so I look forward to sharing that information with you at that point in time. As far as our 2022 fee schedule, on page 3 of the document that you have in front of you, those schedules remain unchanged from what was approved for the existing fiscal year. I would point out the parking meter rates of 50 cents to $1 per hour, which was approved. We didn't end up implementing any parking increases last year, and that's largely because we wanted to support recovery efforts of the pandemic. We will look to do that this coming year, though, which I'll touch upon more. As far as a budget overview, you'll see that our fiscal year 2022 budget reflects anticipated revenues of roughly 1.46 million and expenditures of 1.57. That will result in a deficit of 110,000 roughly, and that's due to a significant capital outlay that we're anticipating in the form of pay stations that will be replacing the on-street parking meters. The board authorized these funds to be taken out of our fund balance, leaving us an anticipated $793,000 fund balance moving forward into fiscal year 2023. So notably, one thing that I'm quite proud of for this past year is that we did refinance our 2011 bond. So by doing that, we were able to reduce our interest rate from 4.35 to 2.45%. So in doing that, we were able to save approximately $25,000 over the remaining term of our original 2011 bond issue, and also decrease our annual debt payment by roughly $15,000. So in doing that, we were also able to add an additional $250,000, which will be used to pay for the Bluff Street ramp repair that is currently underway. So it really helped to put us in a healthier financial position as we close out this fiscal year and start the next one. As far as revenues, as they have traditionally, our TIF funding and our 2 mil taxes are expected to increase slightly from 2021. Those estimates have been provided by Mary and her team at the Treasurer's Office. Parking revenues are anticipated to increase, and that's due to several factors. One being just a general rebound as we, again, hopefully recover from COVID. We did find that over this past year, we didn't have as many people working in downtown as many of them were working from home. That did have an impact on our revenues. So again, as we look to continue to move on, those revenues will rebound. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we do look to implement our variable metered parking rates. And what that means basically is higher traffic areas will probably see an increase to $1 an hour. The outlying areas would remain at 50 cents. Also, we'll continue to implement some of the recommendations that came out of our downtown plan, and those include such things as eliminating or transitioning the 2 hours free in the parking lots, and making that more of a either permit or pay station type environment. And also, just generally speaking, the transition to pay stations. What that will do is, it's been found that pay stations will, I guess, eliminate the piggybacking, for lack of a better term, that occurs when you pull up to a parking meter and there's time left on it. So just by the nature of being a license plate based environment, that alone will increase our parking revenues from the meter side of things, 5 to 10%. Finally, the farmers market. We've made some great strides in regard to the farmers market financials. In recent years, we made some, I would say, difficult decisions as far as working with the vendors to increase those vendor fees, also streamlining operations and reducing our farmers market manager position from full-time down to part-time. We are finally realizing the positive effects of that after a year or two of changes with the farmers market necessitated by COVID. So the online market that we had introduced, and then even this past year, we've been operating with less vendors than we normally have due to capacity limitations. So as we move forward into next year, we see that kind of returning to what our traditional market looks like, and as a result, seeing those revenues increase. As far as expenditures, our personnel costs are expected to increase in 2021. We're fortunate to be able to provide a wage increase to our staff over this past year, reflecting really the labor market as it is now and wanting to retain the great staff that we have. We also would look to provide them a 3% increase in this coming year. And the full-time assistant director position I mentioned earlier. So all of those factors will increase our personnel costs. And generally speaking, we figured a 5% increase in our ordinary operating expenditures. So finally, moving on to our capital outlay. As I mentioned, we will be purchasing 33 pay stations, as well as the site preparation and installation for that endeavor, and $25,000 in signage updates for the pay stations and just general signage updates throughout the parking lots. We look to upgrade some of our maintenance equipment in the form of an additional tractor for snow removal and a commercial grade mower. We will also look to make some repairs to the parking lots in the form of crack filling and sealing for $20,000. And then finally, as we wrap up our MEDC facade restoration initiative program, we do look to reinstate our local DDA facade improvement program. And we have earmarked $30,000 to help downtown properties make improvements to their buildings. So with that said, I'd like to thank you all. I do look forward to coming back in October and sharing more about some of the great things that we're doing. And I welcome any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Becky. Commissioners, any questions for Becky? So she doesn't have to wait. Yep, go ahead, Pro Tem.
Thank you. Yeah, congratulations on all that you guys have had to navigate, in particular this past year and a half. Just so I'm clear, since we are dealing with the numbers today, we'll hear a little more. The capital outlay is being paid for so it's, it's 369,000, and a big chunk of that is Bluff Street, which is being paid for in that refinance, and then the pay stations are being paid for how, just so I have it clear in my head.
That's coming out of our general fund balance.
Okay, so you're going to pay that off in 1 year?
Hopefully, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah, and then, so then it'll just be revenue, then there'll just be parking revenue going forward?
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you.
Again, the Bluff Street ramp project is being paid by that bond refinancing, so those revenues have come in already
Right.
and are restricted for use of that project.
I'm anticipating I'm going to get questions about parking, is where my
I'm sure,
questions, where my
yes.
questions are coming from, so I just want to be able to explain that, in fact, the money was there and allocated, and then we're going to have a real clear revenue source going forward, is what to say about
Yes,
that.
that's correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And congratulations on the farmer's market, too.
Thank you.
That's good.
Other commissioners, questions for Becky? I think you have a lot you can be proud of, especially like getting through COVID and
Thank you.
helping businesses the way that you have. Thank you, Becky, and appreciate the budget you put together here. Look forward to seeing some of these improvements. I heard tractor for snow removal, so that's exciting. I know you always do a good job keeping our downtown looking nice. Thank
Yes,
you.
our maintenance staff really is dedicated in that regard, so we'll continue to work hard to provide that service.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take the reins for the next two component units. We'll start with the Brownfield, which is going to begin on page 14 of your main binder budget books. And those pages are actually pretty much just narrative. We do try and summarize the projects that are still active, and their anticipated termination dates are also presented on that first couple of pages. And then I tried to provide a quick narrative too about the details that you're going to see in the budgets that are starting on page 17. So I'm just going to go in order of how the numerical budgets are presented on page 17, which is actually going to start us off with the administrative fund on page Fund 235. And I always kind of describe this one as the general fund of the Brownfield. This is where we have all the administrative costs that we can't allocate directly to a project. And this is funded by each of the individual projects that are active in the Brownfield. There's a proportionate rate that is transferred into this fund every year. So we started out by determining what the expenditures are going to be. This is primarily the administrative time for the executive director, for the city staff, and as well as their consultant. This year, they're looking at about an $80,000 budget, and that is being funded by transfers in from the remaining projects. Then we start getting into the projects individually themselves. Page 18 is just a wrap-up of the Nestle Down project that ended in this fiscal year. So that plan is terminated, and those taxes are now being fully funded back to the taxing units. Page 19 is going to be the Duke Life Point. This is one of the larger projects, looking at about $3.9 million in captured revenues this year, and that provides enough funding for the transfers out for administration as well as the debt service. And I think you're going to find it's going to be kind of a general for all of these funds is that the captures are sustaining the programs that they're meant to fund. 238 is on page 20. That is 231 West Patisserie, looking at a small capture this year of $22,600, and that is going to be available for funding to the state as well as reimbursement back to the developer. And I feel like these are all going to be kind of the same story as we go through. Liberty Way is looking at about a $530,000 capture. They do have some debt service that they are paying out, and there's going to be possibly an available $470,000 available back to the developer for that project. Page 22 is that revolving loan fund. This is where there are 3 projects that have the possibility of transferring a portion of their capture into this fund. This fund is the one that's meant to grant or loan or provide funding for other environmental or non-environmental remediation projects throughout the city. That is looking to possibly receive $158,000 this year. I believe that's the current balance of that fund is about $250,000, so that'll bring this budget up to about $400,000 available for such projects. Cliffs Dow is looking at about a $51,000 capture, and that'll be available for the monitoring. I'm sorry, that's Fund 242 on page 23. And then finally, the Founders Landing project on page 24 is looking at about a $930,000 capture. This has a long triage of distributions, but so far for fiscal year 22, there will be funding available for I think once we get the funding for the pier redevelopment, there will be a total of 7 debt service payments that are going to be filtering through this fund, and it is capturing enough to be able to maintain those projects. So I know the Brownfield was just recently here to present more of their operational side, so if you have any questions about the capture and the funding side, I'm certainly capable of trying to answer those, or we can address them with the executive director when she's available.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, commissioners, for your patience as we get through this. I think I will allow questions specifically on Brownfield because it just makes sense to go one by one, at least on these component units. I'm actually going to start things off on this. So I have a question on the revolving loan fund. You mentioned 3 potential projects. What are those?
Duke Life Point, or the DLP, is starting to fund that one. Founders Landing also contributes, I believe, 5% of their local capture to that. And Liberty Way is contributing 2.5% to that project.
And what can that $400,000 be used for?
That can be used for environmental and non-environmental reimbursements or grants or loans. I believe the parking study that was proposed for the vault project is going to be funded out of that.
This is probably a silly question, but can we use it to fund a band shell on the island?
You would have to ask the Brownfield for that.
Okay, but there's potential to.
I think it's an untapped tool that the Brownfield has. They do have a policy in place for how they use those funding.
Okay. All right. More to come on that, I guess. I had one other question. Sean wants to weigh in, you say? Do you have something to say? Sorry, Sean.
I was just going to say that fund is just starting to be built, so the possibilities for it are kind of unexplored at the moment, but I mean, there's a reason why the authority has chosen to invest in that, so they can do a lot more.
Good. It's positive. It's always good to hear that there's potential there. Peer redevelopment, you mentioned 7 debt service funds. I guess I don't quite understand what that means. If you could explain a little bit, Mary, and then I'll turn it over to others to ask some questions.
Right. So there's 2010, we had 2 bonds that were issued down there. That's the boardwalk and the seawall, I believe. So those are 2 of the debt service payments we made. The developer themselves have a private debt service arrangements for the parking deck that's down there. And I believe that consists of 3 separate funding sources. Then the city came in with Baraga. So we are funding the Baraga Avenue extension, and then period development will be the final.
Thank you. All right, other commissioners. Commissioner Davis?
Mayor Smith, thank you for asking about the revolving fund, because I was just asking Sean before the meeting started the same kind of questions. So I have just a follow-up question. That is, that policy that you referred to, is that a locally developed policy, or is it something that is a state mandate or state policy?
The authority developed it, and I'm sure it was in conjunction with some other state policies as well. I believe it or not, I believe Cody and Evan were on the board at the time when it was approved. But I would have to follow up with the executive director on
Okay,
the details of that policy.
thank you.
The policy I believe you're referring to, Commissioner Davis, the authority does have its own set of guidance that it can establish itself, and the last time it was amended, I was on the authority, and I believe it was shortly after Commissioner Bonzel was elected to the commission. Prior to that, I'm not sure the last time it had been amended. Commissioner Bonzel might know the answer to that. But aside from that, there are still state statutory rules, obviously, but the authority does have the ability to set its own policies outside of the state guidelines, as long as it doesn't prevent or, contradict what the state says it can do.
Yeah, I would just add to that, Commissioner Mayer, I think, did a good job summarizing it, but essentially, like the last time that the project priority policy was updated, the only change that was made, I believe, was that we included low income and workforce housing as a priority for future brownfield projects, just given the housing affordability crisis the city is facing. But before that, I don't want to, my understanding is it had been quite some time, not only since that project priority policy had been updated, but since the board had really, the authority had really gone back and reflected on it. Between the time that I came onto the Brownfield Authority and left about a year and a half later after getting elected, we really didn't discuss it at all, except for that one small amendment.
Yes, Your Honor, just to comment, I think it's very evident that the commission is going to have to do a very deep dive into the brownfield, how it operates, all their regulations, the various authorities they may or may not have, and how the city commission can interact with that. Because this has been a problem for some time of trying to find out the real facts. I'm not suggesting anybody's hiding anything, but I'm saying that we are certainly lost in the bureaucracy of an organization, that we need to straighten that out and make sure that what they're doing is being done for the full benefit of all of our citizens, and that we as a commission are the authority on that. Technical question, I just noticed with the Founders Landing information that it looks like all of the various projects within Founders Landing are wrapped into one. For example, Founders 2, Founders
Yes.
1, Founders, okay.
Yeah.
So we're getting kind of a mass picture. And certainly, I think, again, as we do our deep dive, we need to be able to put together a report that shows when all of the brownfields are finishing up and paying off, so we have a long-term look that we can better use for financial planning. Thank you for the time, Your Honor.
Pro Tem Hill?
Yeah, it's my memory that one of those was developed like 2 years ago that showed, when would we see another one of those, do you think?
Another one, what? I'm sorry.
Those, the spreadsheet that showed us when they would be paid off, or is it in here, or is it?
On page 14, there's kind of a brief summary. On the very bottom of the program statistics.
I think you may have created it a few years back, Mary, is the one she's referring to.
Okay.
If there's a specific project you're interested in getting
It's
the
the whole
payment schedule
picture.
on.
No, it's the whole picture of how, and there was, it was just a spreadsheet, and it just said, we anticipate seeing the numbers, and, they would fall off and come on, and it just went out over time for each one of the projects, just to see the whole, and when we'd anticipate those funds. Yeah, you created it, Mary.
It's been a while.
It was early or late 2018, right when I got on, because, yeah, it does, it's good to know each project, but I think fundamentally the impact is cumulative. And so it's understanding that cumulative impact, I think, is what folks are interested in. And because I'm noticing too, yeah, I mean, we're talking about having these deficits, but then I'm seeing, and folks, each entity needs to have a set of funds, but, Ldfa has $250,000. Brownfield is going to have $400,000. That's, now we're talking $600,000. Like what's that money going to go to, and how are those projects, what are the decision-making process, things like that. It's understanding those processes. And would be very, very helpful.
Certainly.
And I guess, yeah, is there any way to know that now, or when would we be able to get that information, you think?
So are you looking for payoff dates, when they'll come back on the tax rolls out of the TIF? Because that information, I think Mary has summarized on page 14 under program statistics. The estimated termination dates.
Oh, but then how much, but yeah, it seems like the other one also told us how much money would be coming
Probably.
from those projects. That was, I mean, yeah, so,
I think it might be helpful to have a work session on Brownfield.
Okay.
To educate the commission and include that information, like we've done in the past. I think it's been a little while, but I know we did a work session, probably in 2018. I
Yeah.
don't know if we've had one since.
That wouldn't be a problem to find that
Okay.
report and update it.
because it also, just with it seems like one of the bigger outlays we're going to have is the pier project that the city's directly involved in right now. Is that accurate to say?
The Brownfield will be issuing the bonds on that one.
Okay. So that actually doesn't touch the city funding revenues at this time because it's all inside brownfields? I guess I've lost track, to be honest, sorry.
Those bonds are, the revenues for them are specifically coming from the Brownfield TIF captures. So the city should not be, they're pledging their full faith and credit on those bonds. But again, we've already kind of got a dedicated revenue source from the Brownfield capture, and there's enough capture in there to be able to fund the debt service amortization of those bonds. Does that make sense?
So I think what you're saying is we can pay for the pier projects and pay off the loans with what's coming in.
Correct.
Okay, that's,
Commissioner Mayer?
I'll let some of the other commissioners go first.
Oh, okay. Other commissioners, Commissioner Bonzel?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I just want to say that I agree with you that it would be great to be able to use some of the Brownfield Revolving Fund revenue potentially for some projects that will benefit the community as a whole, like, repairing or replacing the Presque Isle band shell. I think that's a really great idea. And I just want to express a little bit of concern or an expression of caution about, for example, Sean, I think you mentioned that they seem to be planning, the authority seems to be planning to potentially use those funds for some other purposes, like a traffic study for the impacts of the savings bank development, the Vault Marquette development. And I think it's important that maybe, at least for the time being, we sort of put the brakes on that a little bit to the extent that we can, because that's a lot of money. And like funding this expensive traffic study out of the revolving fund could potentially preclude or limit potential uses of those funds for community benefits. I also just had a technical question, which is, and I honestly should know this having been on the authority, but can the MBRA spend revolving fund dollars without commission approval? Or do they need the commission to grant approval to spend those dollars?
Just a correction on your first point. It's there's a $50,000 expenditure out of the revolving loan fund to pay for the parking consultant related to the public parking garage that's coming out of the Vault project. that's something that came out of discussions with the DDA, and it was mentioned definitely, you know, in the work session and the meetings with this board, that we needed somebody to represent the public interest in that, you know, public parking structure. So there's an outside consultant that's currently being sought right now, so that I believe that expenditure was already approved by the Brownfield Authority. I don't believe those need approval from the city commission because it's Brownfield Authority funds.
Great, yeah, and thank you for the correction. It's 50,000. I'm not sure where I got 200,000 from, but I do appreciate the information, and I think to me that speaks to an even greater need for us to be engaging proactively as the city with the MBRA and make sure they understand that we really want to partner with them to maybe, again, work on something like the band shell, and they could get credit for it. And maybe this is a way, I know being on the MBRA, one of the top, and we saw this in our presentation from them, one of their top concerns is public perception, their relationship with the public, communication with the public. I can't think of a better way for them to perhaps improve their reputation with the public, increase credibility with the public, than to work on some kind of project like that. So I guess I'm just trying to encourage, let's get those conversations going if they haven't started already, and if they've started already, let's continue them and redouble those efforts for sure.
And I think I know where you got the $200,000 from. That would be the current revolving fund balance. You know, the Duke Life Point project is supposed to start paying into that fund very shortly, and that's when the fund gets over $1 million and gets some significant contributions. So it will have a lot more flexibility in what it can do in supporting projects that maybe we don't want to have, you know, a TIF involved with, studies that need to be done, you know, different public benefits. So there's a lot of potential, you know, in the future for those funds. Great,
Thank you, Sean. And then the last point that I wanted to make is just that I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Hill and Commissioner Stonehouse that we do need to have a work, and Mayor Smith, that we need to have a work session and a better understanding as a commission about brownfields, when they're being paid off, how much revenue we're going to realize in the general fund at that time. And I think this is especially relevant given that we have had discussions already about potentially shifting to, you know, maybe a 2 or 3 year budgeting process instead of an annual budgeting process, potentially next year going for a roads and streets millage, possibly, right? And I think that, you know, for example, with the millage, to understand how long we would want to ask for on a millage, is it 10 years, 15? I mean, we need to know how much revenue we're going to be getting and when. And I think even in this summary, if I remember correctly, the estimated termination date of 2041 for the DLP brownfield plan, I think has already been revised, right? Like, I think that got revised down. So, I mean, I think we do need an update for sure in the near future on this.
Commissioner Stonehouse?
The technical question, what would happen if the commission does not approve the brownfield budget? I think we have enough questions regarding how it operates and what it might be doing and where they're going with it, that we just don't approve their budget. I mean, we're having a discussion here amongst ourselves with essentially not the data we need to have available to us, with incomplete information sets that regard to those questions we have. How long are we getting a payout? These are basic questions that we should be getting from the brownfield, I think, as part of any budget process, and we're not getting it. So what happens if we don't approve it?
We do still have some time to answer those questions. We're not asking for an approval tonight. This is really just kind of presenting that, so we can certainly go back and see if we can obtain enough information for that comfort level to change. And then also I'd probably really review that language and probably defer to Suzanne on some of those legal aspects of what happens if we don't approve it. So we can certainly look into that question for you.
I would be curious to know what happens if we do not approve that budget, other than get their attention, which we have not been able to get. I offer that, Your Honor.
All right, well, we will try to get some more answers before we approve this budget or review and approve this budget. Any other clarifying questions or comments? Commissioner Mayer?
Just one quick one. UP State Bank, I believe we wouldn't see on here yet because it's still under construction redevelopment, right?
Yeah.
Any idea when we would start to see that, like on this side of the process?
I don't think that's been approved.
It will probably be part of a budget amendment in the next fiscal year. Because of the interlocal agreements, the capture is only going up to the cap that would be for those that are party to that interlocal agreement. So yeah, that fund does not receive any capture at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think we're good on Brownfield for now.
Okay.
Thanks.
And then the last one is the LDFA, which is on page 25. And again, and this is, honestly, it's a very quick one. The captures that we receive in there are dispersed right back to Smart Zone. I know they were just here with an operational update for you recently. We're looking at capturing about $1.2 million in that fund. You'll notice that under the local capture, that there's a $400,000, and that is the cap that the city contributes to the LDFA fund. So on schedule, believe it or not, we have arrived at that calculated cap for the LDFA captures.
They spend $1.2 million in a year?
That is their capture for this year, and we just distribute that to them. They have a separate budget that I think they presented to you at their last.
I don't think they had figures in that.
Oh, okay.
Pro Tem Hill?
Yeah, I would like to have have a work session regarding this budget, because they did not present information to us. And then I will say that the director did reach out to me and send me an email asking for further clarification, which honestly, I confess I haven't answered. But I was, I don't think the rest of you got that email. I asked him some questions. Yeah, so I think this really concerns me. We've had businesses go through a lot of hardship with this COVID year, and it's not apparent to me what LDFA has done to support the businesses who are here or bring in new businesses at this time. And I would really like to understand what they're going to be doing to support economic development when they're receiving this level of funding. When folks like DDA was passing out money to multiple businesses. So I felt like what we heard from them was the pitch of what they want to be doing, but I haven't heard yet what the impact has been or where the money's going.
And I will kind of advise too that the Smart Zone budget is going to be different than the LDFA budget. This fund that we provide here is, I know using the word pass-through is probably a bad term, but really that's all it is we're taking, it's a tool for capturing the taxes on these properties, and we pass that to Smart Zone. Smart Zone also has other revenue sources, I believe, too. So this is our portion of the funding that they are receiving. But
Well, even more so,
sure,
to my
right,
mind.
yep.
I understand that. I guess I'd like to see what the Smart Zone is spending their money on.
So, I mean, this is tax revenue that we could be spending on other things, and I'd like to see what the results are for our community.
Commissioner Stonehouse?
I believe this is tied into matching a state grant that's partially funding the Smart Zone also. So it's strictly a funding mechanism for the Smart Zone. We have a financial obligation we have made to them and a commitment. So it's nothing that we turn around and stop quickly, and it's certainly something that has great economic potential for the city, but it's, again, Smart Zone driven. And
Well,
remember,
let's
the
see
Smart
let's
Zone is
see what
also
they're doing.
composed of Northern Michigan University, so it's a multifaceted beast.
Commissioner Mayor?
I think I'll just reframe this a little bit. I think what Mayor Pro Tem Hill is more so saying is similar to how you're expressing getting more of a better look at what's going on with the Brownfield Fund, just having a better idea and seeing more so where this money is going for you know, the LDFA, I believe is more or less what you were getting at, correct?
We don't know where this money's going. I mean, at least I have a sense of where the Brownfield money's going. I have no idea where this money's going.
Other commissioners?
So are we looking for additional information before the next meeting?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say a breakdown if we can get one, and whatever, maybe a copy or reminder of what our agreement is, what we've committed to, and then how they spend their money. Because again, that was not part of the presentation as I remember it either.
And it's not enough to say that it's matching a state grant. What is it actually being spent on, please?
Yeah.
Just, yeah.
I think that's it for the component units. I think we went through piece by piece on these, so move into the general fund and then water rates, and what is the fourth one? I started writing them down.
Fee schedule and then water rates.
Fee schedule and then water rates. Okay, so first general fund. So second, I should say.
Yes.
Is it the handout?
Yes. So yes, so let's focus on the handout that was sent out last week, but then also printed and placed on your, at your seat. All right, so a brief just overview, and then Jenna, actually, I don't know if you want to ask anybody's questions.
I couldn't
I think
hear you.
Commissioner Bonzo has a question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Bonsall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a clarifying question. We received a draft general fund budget on Friday and then also received one today. Is there any difference? Have there been any updates made between those two? Because I think we got, the draft budget was emailed to us again about like an hour or two before the meeting.
There's been no changes.
Okay, thank you.
Just a gentle reminder. All right, so at the last meeting and discussion over the general fund budget, we had a little bit of homework to go back and investigate and crunch some numbers and come up with some solutions, long-term and short-term. We are focusing on these short-term solutions because that is where we are at for the next fiscal year, knowing full well that this is buying us time. And as it was summarized, we have narrowed it down into a bulk of various things that we've changed from the last budget. And Mary, if you don't mind, I'll run through them and then you can elaborate a little bit more. So the biggest savings that we have done with the budget is actually utilizing a portion of our ARPA funds. So the amount that we would be receiving in the next fiscal year, we would be using those to support revenue loss. That is a preliminary calculation that allows us to do so. And Mary, you can jump in at any time on this one, but it is an intended use and an allowable use of those ARPA funds. That is one of the revenue sources coming in immediately that we could change. The rest of these are actually cost savings that we are proposing and working towards. So looking at reduction in travel expenditures, specifically that does impact, I believe, all of you, and we discussed. But reducing some of those travel expenditures. We will be reducing and talking about evaluating overtime that is utilized and making sure that it is essential, and evaluating all of our procedures in order to ensure that we have efficiencies that will not result in overtime then, and reduce overtime. Looking at elimination of some of those one-time consulting studies, which include the tourism study and a economic impact study as well, which involved, I believe, the arts and culture. And then also limiting some of those transfers out to only cover debt service. So we really looked at the transfers that have gone out to other funds, including the Street Fund, Lakeview Arena, and our Lighthouse Park, and are looking at only focusing on those debt service needs, which would have an impact on some of those funds and their operations. So at a high level, that was able to get us down to using fund balance of 1.9. So let's think about where we started previously, which was over 4 million. And with these few things, although they are very large, we were able to get down to that targeted amount, less than the targeted amount actually. I believe the target amount was 2 million, and we were able to get down to 1.9. And that falls within that time frame of the 120 days, I believe, use of fund balance amount that we were trying to maintain. So Mary, if you have more details on those, I would really welcome those to expand on those, please.
Yeah, I guess I'm mostly concerned in that this is not the permanent fix. And even though on paper, we can get those figures down to the $1.9 million using fund balance, some of these changes are not quick fixes, and they're going to take a lot of time and effort. I mean, in order to say that we can reduce our transfers out to cover only debt service, that means that, we have to find other sources of funding for SIMP, for College Avenue, whether we choose to bond, whether we choose to go after those street millages, developing revenue streams for Lighthouse Park and Lakeview Arena. On paper, it can look like, hey, look, we can do it, but these are going to take some serious efforts in order to accomplish them. So I think they're good short-term goals. If we don't start implementing them now, my concern is that we're going to be facing the same conversation again next year, because these are some pretty short-term fixes that can get us through and buy us some time.
The long-term goal is addressing the actual revenue issue, and that is where we were talking about the possibility of a road millage. Now that comes with some timing constraints here. We are aware that there are other ballot initiatives that are going out that we're respectful of, but then also planning to make sure that we are utilizing it at the right time and being able to really gather that information and assess how we go about addressing that revenue in the form of possibly a millage. So that is preliminary. That is still in the works, and very much some details that need to be figured out. But that is our long-term goal on that.
Okay, so, nice work, thank you. So, from what I understand, we had originally we had a 5.8 million question mark. You got it down to 4 million.
Yes.
The 4 million is now down to 1.9 million with the use of ARPA funds, which is what exactly? I know it's 1 million, but is it 900 and something thousand or?
1,050,000.
Thank you.
Approximately.
So it's a million. Just making sure I'm not like 200,000 off. And then you cut 1.1 million-ish. Right? Am I
Yes.
accurate in that? Nice work.
1.1.
That's, which is what we asked, I think what the commission generally asked you to do. We may have questions or concerns, but you took our last meeting and you ran with it, and I appreciate that very much. So my outstanding questions, and then I will turn it over to the commission. Capital improvement projects, I'll work my way small and work my way up. So that tour that we did, what is left on that list that's actually happening? Let me get mine out.
Yeah, so far on the list is, and I think I updated, there should be another new colorful sheet.
Oh, it's underneath here somewhere. Thank you.
Predominantly, that's going to consist of Lakeshore, the 2022 SIMP, and the College Avenue project.
Okay, those are three things that I had written down. So the other items that are on here have to do with either like stormwater, or what about the ones that were grants? Did those get cut? Or they're just not on this sheet? Like the Tourist Park North Access Road.
That would be covered by the Tourist Park Fund.
So that's not on here, but it's still happening. Sorry, let me just, Presque Isle Marina Phase 3, still happening, because that's a grant. Right?
I have to double check that.
Okay, I'm just, because this is what this
Yep.
was our tour, and I'm just trying to line up where we.
Focus is on general fund, so.
Oh, these aren't
Excuse
all
me.
general fund. This is why I
Yep.
see, because they're grant.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
And capital.
Got it. Okay, so the budget as presented includes SIMP, which I have not heard a lot of question or controversy about. I may be wrong there. Includes College Avenue, which I know that we have some questions about, and includes Lakeshore Boulevard, which I know we have some questions about. So before we get a bunch of questions, maybe I'll give you a chance to summarize where we're at with both of those, and then we can turn to the commission. Does that sound fair to the commission? Okay.
If I can summarize my concerns about those three projects, is that traditionally our policy has been that we only bond for what we have amortized in the prior year. At that $5.5 million, that means if we do continue to bond at that rate, we can bond for Lakeshore. So at this time, at the initial time when we had our meeting on the general fund, the transfers out were funding other portions of like College Avenue and Simp. So I guess to try and summarize, if we're going to take the cuts to those transfers out for those projects, it's coming up with some other solution for bonding for the Simp and for the College Avenue, if those are going to continue in the capital outlay process.
Okay, I didn't understand what you said.
So, okay, let me back up.
Just flat
Okay.
out.
SIMP is in the budget now as it currently stands, correct? Or is it not?
It's not.
Oh,
Because,
okay.
for the general fund would not be able to support the transfers out for
Or
that
SIMP?
project.
I
Correct.
misunderstood that, and I'm sorry, and that's why I'm confused too.
Yeah, I'm
I assumed that was a given, which I guess nothing is a given, but, so that has been cut from the budget as it stands now,
From the general fund.
from the
yes.
general fund, and it's not being funded anywhere else at this point in time.
There's so many moving parts to this. It can be, that's the thing, depending on the directions we go.
Yeah.
If we bond for it, if we go above our policy, we can bond for it, then it's funded. If we pursue the option for the street millage, that could also fund it.
But that would probably not be right away.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so at this point in time, SIMP is not in the budget. But on this
But College
sheet,
Ave is? That's what I don't understand.
but it says for 20, I'm confused because it's on the sheet. I don't know. Because it's a potential that we
Yeah.
could add back in? Is this an à la carte menu?
So that, bonding beyond our policy and bonding beyond our capacity,
Yeah, that doesn't sound good.
which is not
Okay.
possible to bond beyond your capacity.
What are we going to do? I'm sorry, it's just really unclear. What are we going to do?
Let's focus on trying to do all three of those big projects. No?
Which are?
I mean, I'm looking,
I don't know what they are.
Okay, for,
Simp and College Avenue, right?
The two green and the blue.
Okay. Okay.
I thought SIMP was going to be the easiest one, so I'm sorry.
I know. It's a small portion of the general fund, which is why it's really not on my radar.
Mr. Mayor?
I just did a little bit of math here, and let's say hypothetically, we didn't do College Ave. I got here a deficit of $64,600 for the year. That sound right?
Well, no, because there's a grant.
We'd have to give the 325,000 back.
Yeah, it's like 1.5 mil or 1.4 something.
Right, 300,000. Okay, yes, I didn't add that.
325,000.
So 364,000 then. But I think,
He's taking this number and just subtracting it, but I don't
Yeah.
think you can do that because they're not actually accounting in the budget for us to have that money yet, kind of, I think.
So the funding goal for all of these would be using bonds and grants. This is not a write a check out of the general fund necessarily for that exact project. So it's not a one-off, if we take a project out, that decreases what our deficit is. Not at all. That is utilizing grant funding and, bond proceeds and grant funding as well.
Yeah.
So annual debt payments is what you see those transfers covering.
So,
my bad, I misunderstood then.
so let me clarify. The recommendation as it stands today, when we got here, is to do what with these three projects?
I wait for your decision on that. I wait for your guidance on that.
I guess we need to understand what the impact, though, would be. That would be helpful. I guess that's what I'd feel like I don't understand.
So, and to summarize, in what we're doing with the general fund is, don't even include those projects, because the general fund is currently set to only fund the debt service payments that are going to those street projects. So as we're looking at the general fund right now, to get to that 1.9 million, we don't even need to consider the capital outlay budget. Does that
So the
make sense?
1.9 million that we are taking from our reserves does not
Does
have to do
cover
with
any-
these three projects.
Correct, yes, yes.
Now I understand.
Yes.
So
Think I do too.
regardless of what we do here, we're still taking 1.9 million out of reserves.
Correct.
If we do anything here, we're bonding above our limit, or above our
Policy.
our policy, our self-imposed limit.
Yes.
Does that help? I feel like I'm a little more clear now. Okay, so the general fund as it stands is at a $1.9 million fund balance use.
Yes.
Okay, now remind us, yeah, sure.
But does that include any bonding at this point?
The general fund does not include any bonding.
Okay, so are you, how much do you feel that we can bond for? You talked about the 5.5 that we, or do we need to bond for less in order to stay within our
That's the
limits?
policy that we've been covering. I mean, when I look at the, there's more than one bond that we're looking into doing in the near future. So I'm cautious on what to recommend above our policy. Can we bond for the all 9 million? You know, these are, I'm really looking for guidance from you too. I mean, I can talk numbers, but the direction that we want to go really comes from you.
Go ahead, Pratim.
So just sticking with the capital projects in front of us, doing college but not doing the utility replacements on M41, see, that seems to be a direct trade-off. Is that accurate to say? Because that's something that's only going to happen next year, that I don't understand. That, I mean, the state's going to pull that road up. And are we not going to do the utility replacement?
So that comes out of the water and storm fund. So I believe that's a different category than what we're speaking of right now. If you look how everything's laid out, is that correct, Mary?
Okay, then.
Right. Yep.
So
All
it's a
right,
tough.
could you go through the sheet for us, please?
Yeah, this,
Sorry.
it just isn't making sense.
The white ones are funded differently. Maybe? No?
Well, yes.
So let's get down to what our recommendation is. Our recommendation is to really focus on Lakeshore Boulevard, reassess College Ave, and talk about whether we want to fund SIMP or not. And that is looking at going beyond what our policy states, but within our capacity to bond. So that is how we are presenting that information.
Okay.
I think that provides a little bit more of a direction. Otherwise, we're piecemealing and a la carting, as you so eloquently put it.
So, I guess, I mean, I know there's concern that with, the question really then I think that's on the table maybe is College Ave. Maybe we just focus on that. I mean, to me, SIMP, as you said, to me is a given. I mean.
Yeah, that's what I'm like, this is even on the table? That was shocking to me, but I understand
Yeah.
it's money.
But College Ave is something that if we were not going to do something, it is a hit and it is problematic in that the road is not in great shape, but that area is likely to be redeveloped. And so spending money on an area that's going to be redeveloped and probably have to tear the road up again, is my understanding. It seems like that would give us some breathing room at best. To my mind, rather, I do not want to give up anything with SIMP. I just don't. I think that's really critical. And I know folks have been waiting on College Ave and it has extra funding, but it doesn't seem like of these, in terms of if what you're looking for is priorities, I would prioritize SIMP over College Ave.
Commissioner Bonzo?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. In general, I would agree with Mayor Pro Tem Hill. I have a very hard time imagining how, as a commissioner, I'm supposed to explain to city residents that, yeah, we cut SIMP, so your road that maybe was supposed to be getting fixed or repaved or whatever, your sewer lateral is supposed to be replaced this year, that's not gonna happen because we're gonna do phase 2 of Lakeshore Boulevard on schedule, and because we're gonna redo this section of College Ave that has like 6, 7, 8 houses on it maybe, which is gonna be potentially redeveloped in the somewhat near future. I mean, that just, I think to like the average city resident of Marquette, that just doesn't make a whole lot of common sense. And I understand that it's not just about common sense, it's about grants, it's about things like that, but I mean, I would echo that I would much rather, and I understand it's not a one-to-one trade-off, but I would much rather delay the College Avenue project and potentially even at least components of phase 2 of Lakeshore Boulevard than X out SIMP for an entire year. Especially if next year we are gonna need to go to the people and make the argument for why we need a local roads and streets millage. Like, my question as a taxpayer and a voter in the city would then be, oh, but like, how are you affording phase 2 of Lakeshore Boulevard then? How are you affording to redo this pretty long, expensive stretch of road that doesn't seem to be a super high priority? I mean, I hope people understand where I'm coming from on this, but I'm like, I think we need to, you know, be making sure that we're keeping the folks that we were elected to represent in mind. And I think people are going to have some real concerns about the direction we're talking about going right now.
Commissioner Hanley? I want to piggyback on that. Now, we've discussed, if we do bond out just for, say we did just SIMP and Lakeshore, how much, like, but what is our, like, how close are we to the bonding limit? Is Lakeshore itself putting us over the bonding limit if we bond for that, or like?
We're within our capacity
Okay,
even. But,
now here's the thing. I know we're not allowed, I mean, I know that it would be cost prohibitive to get rid of the whole Lakeshore project, but is it possible to reconfigure it down to something smaller, to still be using the grant, to still be doing stuff, but to not be spending quite this much? Is there things that we can take out and change?
Based off of the discussions that I've had with Dennis, the grant is tied to the scope of the project that was presented and submitted. So we are very much tied to that. The figures that we are looking at are actually conservative, so we are anticipating them not to be as high. However, they are conservative for a reason. The commitment that we do have for that grant, we have already expended funds from there. So if we do change something, we run the risk of losing that and having to return over $1 million, which would come substantially from the general fund.
Absolutely. Commissioner Mayer?
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, just to clarify, you said Lakeshore Boulevard, it would be within our capacity. Is it going above the policy, though, that we have been kind of back and forth referring to?
yeah, yes, it would be.
Okay. So we would either be going over that policy, or we would have to possibly pay back over $1 million for the first half of the grant. Right?
Essentially, yes.
Okay, thank you.
In the simplest terms.
Yeah.
Yes. We do have some update on College Ave, if you don't mind. You know, there are some options with that. We do not have to commit until September of 2022, and I don't think that contracts need to be signed until after that. So that would be after fiscal year 22. That buys us a little bit more time, buys us some time to assess whether we are, what is really our priority. And it does give us options for looking into what our funding sources could potentially be, and getting us closer to that street millage possibility.
That's good news. And, yeah, and I also think, so Lakeshore Boulevard, is going to take up all of our bonding capacity, and to do anything more than that means that we're going over what we would normally do, to take out a loan, basically. Now,
Even with Lakeshore, I think they were saying we already will be over.
We're already taking.
Yeah, we're gonna
that
be
loan.
over it with Lakeshore.
They're
We'll be
bonding.
over it.
So
Lakeshore
it-
puts us over.
okay, so then that means then where does that leave, if we don't, okay, this is what does that include or not include the SIMP?
It does not include the sim. If it's included, then we're even over.
I think the question is, so Lakeshore Boulevard is already over kind of like the policy that we have for bonding. I don't believe it's too far over, but it is over. The question is, do you want to add SIMP to that? You know, it's not necessarily taking, you know, on a loan more than what bonding already is. You know, is that a priority to this commission to do SIMP as well? There are some pretty concrete commitments to Lakeshore Boulevard and money that we'd have to return that would be, you know, of greater impact if we didn't do the project.
Yeah, well,
Is SIMP
I'd
something
always
that you
been
wanna do
concerned
beyond
about that from day one, so here we are.
Commissioner Stonehouse?
Let me please give a little history. I was on the commission when we developed the policy. The policy was never meant to be a hard and fast rule. It was simply guidance for the commission year to year, how much money we would want to bond for. We obviously can change it up, we can change it down. It's only 7 people that came up with that. Us 7 here made that decision. We can go up with it, down with it, left with it, right with it, whatever we want to. But we should not be using it as a crutch to say we can't go above it or we shouldn't go above it or whatever. At one point in time, that made a lot of sense. It may not make sense today, and we may well want to change that, and we certainly can do that. I'm a strong proponent of finishing Lakeshore Boulevard for all the financial reasons that were discussed. I do think we should probably look at college and say, what can we do about punting this and kicking it down the road to the future and free up some money that might be directed to Sims. I think that would be a good partial solution to what we want to do. Thank you.
So I have a question on the Lakeshore Boulevard. I know we talked about this, I don't know, was it yesterday, Karen? I'm losing track. I was hoping to see kind of what the plan was for Lakeshore, cost and timelines, and what grant funds we have and what we need to do. And one thought that comes to mind, I understand that we submitted a project. I'm looking at the most recent grant application. It talks about coastal habitat, all these things. From my recollection, back at the work session, probably in 2018, there was $1 million beach. Can we cut the beach? Is that a thing we can do? You're going to tell me no.
Again, I'm going to defer to Dennis, but my understanding is the scope of the project included all components.
We can't
of it,
change
phase 1,
anything?
phase 2.
The grant paid for the beach, and then everything else came after that. That's how it was set up from the beginning.
This doesn't
It
say-
started with the beach.
I'm
It
looking
did not start
at-
with the road.
But I'm looking at the grant application. It doesn't say beach.
The original one did.
Are you looking at the NIFWIF grant?
I'm looking at the one from,
The NIFWIF grant is the grant in question, funding
only
for
for the
phase 2.
beach.
Coastal Management Program Grant Opportunity. This is the one from February of 2021. So this is more recent. Yeah, Dennis, please, please help me. So the NIFWIP was the very first one we started things off with.
It's okay, because this grant is what Mick and I work on about 60 hours a week lately. Trying to bring the funding down more reasonable so it helps the community out. The NIFWIF grant did require a beach. That was a really big deal, but we have pared that down to the absolute bare minimum, and it's no longer a $1 million beach as it would be presented in that grant agreement. We are also working on the permit with Eagle, and per communication we had with Eagle just this afternoon, that we're going to be meeting with them to review the permit application and look at a couple possible changes, which would probably pare things down a little bit more. So keep in mind that the estimate when the city manager said it's very conservative, it's extremely conservative. We had, and I don't have it in front of me, but I can certainly get it back to the commission. We had put one together there was a spreadsheet that I had sent city manager Angeli that had all of the grants listed and how much the city would have to pay, how much the grant would pay for, what the total would be if we got grant A, and if we got grant A, B, and C, and if we got grant A, B, C, and D. We're taking everything as if we only get grant A, right? Like the worst case scenario, because what we don't want to do is have the commission approve this project in the capital improvements plan, And then I come back to you with my tail between my legs 6 months later and say, well, I'm sorry, we didn't budget enough conservatively. We need more money for it. So we've gone on the high conservative end of that. But I do ask for your continued trust in that when we work on this with Baird Engineering, we have our foot on the gas to let them know that you need to come up with something that really is not going to break the bank. And that's been the constant message that we've had with them. And it has also taken us back through 3 different design iterations because of that, and causing us to spend probably what I would consider, in my professional opinion, a lot more time on it than we probably should have. But there are a lot of unique aspects to it. So, original question, yes, there's a beach. It's not $1 million one, though. It's just enough to call it a beach.
Okay.
However, now how we balance that in the actual project design itself was by that's where the living revetment comes in, where we use the smaller cobble, where everybody in the community can go down and touch the water anywhere they want to.
Okay. Commissioner Bonzo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Dennis, I mean, speaking for myself, like, I do trust, and I know that you're working very hard to keep those costs down. You're working very closely with Baird, with Eagle, and I really appreciate all the time and effort that you and your office have been putting into that. You know, my only concern, and I guess my question, is that, you know, we are still looking at, I mean, this is still a very expensive project, and I guess some clarification on what I'm hearing is that we cannot, like, it is impossible to delay any component of phase 2 as it stands right now without having to pay back a bunch of money. And maybe that's a misunderstanding, but I mean, I guess if that is the case, like, why? And if not, like, please explain to me how I'm misunderstanding this.
I'd be glad to explain that, at least from my perspective. And I hate to present it in a way like I'm defending some project that the staff really wants to do or whatever. Please understand that we were given the direction, albeit from the city manager previously, get it done. And you know my office, when you tell us to get it done, we're going to get it done, right? So, operating under that, and we're moving forward with this grant, part of that grant was hiring Baird Engineering to do the coastal engineering for us, because they are the only qualified firm on the Great Lakes to do that. Well, we've spent almost a year with them doing the design. Their design costs are generally around 10% of the project cost. We're at the finish line with them. That's about $1 million. The grant is not held by the city. The grant is held by Watershed Partnership, nonprofit. They have applied for an extension of the grant, which we're going to believe that we're going to get, which is going to bring us to starting construction next year, which happens to be the schedule that we're at right now. So if we were failed to meet that schedule, or we were to push it beyond that, and they were not able to get a grant extension, someone is going to have to pay the design fees to Baird. And in our conversations, as I understand that, that's not something that we can bond for. And that's 10% of a $10 million project. So that could be $1 million cost to the city. And that's our concern with it. I don't know if you have anything else to add, but.
I would just add that, you characterize it as a directive from, City Manager Angeli. And that's a directive that came from the city commission.
Correct.
Right.
I don't want to look like I was hanging out Mike to dry on that one, because we had the work sessions, we had the meetings, it was approved, and that was his direction to say go. And we've been operating under that.
It was
moving forward.
Commission, priority, and there were many, many public votes on, this particular topic, and that's what the go was from. So I just want to make sure that this was the commission, priority that was enacted, by Mike. and then the staff.
No, that's a very good point.
Okay, thank you. I do appreciate that. I guess just to finish up real quick, I think what would be helpful for all of us at this point, because, you know, going back about a year ago, and I know some things have changed, but, you know, it seemed like we were sort of on track and everything was going according to plan. And you know, I would just really appreciate like a breakdown. It could just be emailed to the commissioner, mentioned during a portion of a regular meeting or something. But to see a breakdown of all of the funding sources that like a year or two ago we had initially planned to use for phase 2, whether that's from the city budget, grants, okay, things of that, bonding, things of that nature. Then all the funds that we actually received are allocated. Again, you know, everything under that umbrella, grants, city budget, et cetera. And then finally, a breakdown of any of the reasons behind any like difference or discrepancy between those two things. For instance, if we didn't get a grant that we were hoping to get, like why didn't we get it? What was the financial impact of that? If costs increased, how much did they increase, and you know why?
I have all of that.
Yeah.
Nothing really has changed based upon that previous spreadsheet that I have, so that's no problem. I can get that to you tomorrow.
Okay.
First thing in the morning.
Thank you, Dennis.
We
I really
have that
appreciate
available.
it. I appreciate it. And thanks for the information.
Commissioner Mayer?
Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you to the four of you for answering our series of questions here. And thank you, Commissioner Stonehouse, for giving a little bit of background on the debt policy and where that came from. You know, I think, I don't want to speak for all of us, but, you know, I personally, I want us to be able to finish the Lakeshore Boulevard project. I really do. And then there's the concept of the policy. But as Commissioner Stonehouse mentioned, you know, that's not necessarily something that could indefinitely prevent us from doing it. But I also think us as a commission just kind of ignoring it defeats the purpose of us even setting the policies. So the way I'm kind of seeing this, if we were going to pursue doing this, we would also need to amend said debt policy to allow for it, and not just.
I don't think it's an actual policy.
Was it an actual policy adopted by the commission?
It just was a working agreement.
It's a commission guideline. Is that fair?
That's policy,
Fair
I think,
statement.
that we follow.
Okay, so we don't have any official policy
It's
on
not
this.
an adopted policy.
Okay.
Commissioner Hanley?
Never mind then.
The only thing I have to say with that, and I agree that it's just a best practices, but from what I remember in previous meetings, didn't our rating get hit because of the amount of bonds we have and things like that already? Would this affect that more and our ability to get bonds in the future? Is this going to be something that is going to negatively affect us with our rates that we're getting for it?
The Bond Council and Rating Agency, they have liked the fact that we've been following such a policy. I think from my conversations, the biggest ding that we had was that use of fund balance over the last couple of years with our general fund. That is what's causing the concern, and that's what's partially generating that negative outlook.
Okay. Go ahead, Pro Tem Howe.
So, I think it's critical to understand with Lakeshore Boulevard that there are funds that we have been told no. And so what was presented to us a year ago, we have heard no on some of those potential sources of funding. And it is coming back, as I understand it right now, having not seen the numbers, but knowing that we got told no, that we actually don't have enough money. We don't have the money that when this was presented to us, there were other sources of funding to cover the costs. Those sources have not come in. And so are we, so you need to present us with the information, because that is what I understand at this moment in time, so if I'm wrong, correct me.
The only grants that we didn't receive was a GLRI, I believe, forestry grant, and it was actually a de minimis amount. It was less than 0.01% of the total cost of the project. And there's another small grant out there as well, and I'll provide that in my summary tomorrow. They
I'm
were
referring
very,
to the
very
FEMA
small.
The FEMA grants that were put out as possible sources of funding that we have not received. And is that money ever going to get here, or is it just being hung out there as a potential that isn't actually going to happen, and the city was always going to pay for this?
Yeah, we'll have that all. I'll have it all in the spreadsheet tomorrow.
But
So I think you're referring to the FEMA grant, which is the BRIC grant.
right.
And that is, yeah, there's quite a few grants, I think, that we were exploring, from my information, or from my understanding from reviewing past information on that. So there is still some questions on why we did not receive that, but it was a highly competitive grant. I do believe that there was a long list of applicants, and then they did select to go forward with a few of those at this point. So we will summarize that some more, I probably said tomorrow.
Yep.
So I think the question really on the table is, what other sources of funding are there? And we're being told that because of a grant that an outside organization applied for, we are now putting this money forward. I mean, the grant's being held by another organization, and it was the linchpin that made the NIFWIF grant. And so there was an agreement, apparently, that that entity which qualified for that funding would then get that money, which meant that all this other money would be spent. Right?
So, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I believe you're referring to our contract with the Watershed Partnership, where they write grants for us, and they were able to secure the NIFWIF grant, and then the city committed to that grant. The process.
And because of their partnership with them, we were also able to secure FEMA pre-disaster mitigation funding, which covered the cost of phase 1 of the project, which we are still waiting for reimbursement on. And those two were the key grants. The FEMA BRIC grant didn't come up until after the city had committed to the project. That came up like a year after we had committed to the project.
So that's the kind of information that we need to understand. And I feel like we have to pay 20 questions to get this information. And we're not going to, and so we're changing policies, or pretend not policies, but we're having to bond more than we normally would to get things done so that this project can be finished. And we're being told that it can't be changed, so what happens when the bids come in and the bids are higher than we want them to be? What happens then? I feel I have a fiduciary responsibility to ask that question. This isn't really about you guys. You guys, I know, are doing what you need to do.
No,
but
that's an appropriate question. And
every single bid that's come in this year has been overbid. So what happens when the bid comes in and it's 40% more than we planned to pay for?
well, first and foremost, that's why we've had a conservative estimate, expecting that could occur. And also, we have the opportunity to reject that bid and go back and have a discussion with the agency and say, look, this came in at 25% over what we had anticipated, and we were already 25% higher. You can have those discussions with the funding agencies. And at the same time, we're still continuing to look for other available funds. There's FEMA funding that was just being put into actually being worked into a legislative bill at the federal level that's going to be a different program. And on all of those opportunities that we continue to look for are things that we continue to search for.
So as for requesting, more information, we will certainly compile that into a way that I think we're better understanding what some of these questions are. I've received questions from you, and I believe Commissioner Bonzel has also submitted some questions regarding Lakeshore. So that is something we can certainly do. I do have past information that I am going off of for my own knowledge, of which does explain the possibility for 2 different types of FEMA grants. Neither were promised. However, we were able to secure the one that we had very much some confidence on, but that other BRIC grant was not something that is not expressed here as promised. So we will summarize that for you and for the commission and make sure that we get that out.
So, and then last question, if I may, which is the other really worst-case scenario is what if we don't get reimbursed for the expenses that have been incurred? That's like worst case, right? I mean, we haven't been reimbursed yet, so is that hanging out there? Is there any time frame on when that might be understood? Just to put it all out there on the table.
We are, and Dennis, jump in at any time, but we are currently working through, as you know, with some federal level funding, there's a lot of red tape that has to go, that we have to cross and get through. And there is something that we are working through on a small piece of land that's kind of holding up that process, and we've made some great strides on that.
Yeah.
We've taken a different avenue, and I believe that's a big collaborative effort between our city attorney and Dennis.
And were you asking, in addition to that, were you asking, well, what's the worst case scenario that we do this, we get a good bid, we spend the money, but then the granting agency doesn't pay us? Is that what you were saying?
No, that was that there's,
Not qualified.
it was phase one that hasn't been reimbursed.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm
Okay.
referring to.
I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah.
So I know commissioners have questions. Process question, this will be, I'm assuming we're scheduling a public hearing at our meeting on the 13th, and then the second meeting in September is when we are reviewing and approving whatever the budget may be.
Correct.
So we've got 2 chances to discuss this, but the public hearing scheduling may be on consent. So I just, for the commission to understand that this is turning around pretty quick. Within the week, we're going to have this on an agenda. So we need some of these answers kind of quickly. I don't know. I don't feel great about this, but I'll work my way through it and ask what questions I may have. Commissioner Bonzo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had to shift away from Lakeshore Boulevard a bit because, I mean, based on the information we've been provided, it sounds like our options there are quite limited, but perhaps less limited with College Avenue. And so my question is, so the College Avenue, looking at the city budget, it seems that, out-of-pocket expenditures for this project in the proposed budget are like a little under $1 million for the city. And of course, we're getting some matching or some grant funds as well. And then on this community development capital outlay spreadsheet we have in front of us, looking at SIMP and sanitary sewer lateral replacement, that was projected to be about $900,000 for fiscal 22 if we still go through with it. So my question is, I guess, there seems to be an interesting symmetry there between those two numbers, and what would the impact be? How much money would be freed up in the general fund and other funds by not going through with College Avenue, if any? I guess that's my
Zero.
question.
We'd answered this one already.
0, okay, all right.
Sorry. Cody asked that earlier, Commissioner Mayor, didn't you? Yeah. So the 1.9 million we're using from reserves has nothing to do with, this is just how much we want to bond for, these 3 items. Okay, so I think you probably have a sense that College Avenue is something that we're willing to hold on for now. It sounds like the other 2 items are still something the commission would like to see move forward with more information in place. I guess I would like some information about if we push off College Avenue, what that does for us, because we're not going to take that grant money. How does that impact us? The 300.
Overall, or?
What do you say, Mary?
Overall, or?
Well, I mean, does it impact our relationship with that funding entity? Does it?
Let me do that one. So that is a touchy subject because you are turning down a grant that I believe the city's been waiting for quite some time. Small urban funding is highly competitive, and we tend to, I think, get overlooked. However, I do believe that relationship is changing anyways, and I would probably really defer to Mick and possibly, I think somebody else, Dennis might have had some further information on that one, but I would defer to them on their relationship and their perception on that, but I think that's changing.
This is another one, there's like a flurry of activity because Karen probably feels like I tell her one thing and then I turn around and I'm sending her a text while this meeting started. I just heard back from MDOT again, because going into the meeting, we actually thought we had a solution that we would have until December of 2022 to spend the funds, which means that we could recommend to the commission that we could carry it over 1 year and the problem's solved. But MDOT operates on the same fiscal year budget that we do, and those funds are allocated, so they have to be committed to by September of next year, which creates a conflict with us. There is one other opportunity that I just found out about in the meeting, reading my email, that MDOT had emailed us back and said there could be a possibility that we could switch our funding with another local community. It's not something that's done hardly ever. It needs approval from management at MDOT, which I don't know what that means. That could be someone in a cubicle in Lansing, or it could be somebody on the governor's staff, but that's another potential that we could work with as well. Mick and I had talked internally. Can we send out bids in September with our fingers crossed that the next commission is going to approve it next year in the capital improvements budget? And if it doesn't get approved, then of course we got to go back to the contractor and say, well, I'm sorry, we're going to execute the city reserves the right to reject any and all bids because it didn't get funded. So there are some opportunities out there. I hope that helps you with making your decision.
That does help. Thank you, Dennis. Much appreciated. All right, so we're gonna get some more information on Lakeshore Boulevard. I don't know what else we really need on SIMP. I think we understand that pretty clearly, and then we'll just have to follow up with questions and sit with that decision for a future meeting. I think, unless there are other items on the general fund, of which I know this is the capital improvement, we took a detour.
We did.
But I think that's it for general fund, unless there's something else.
Sure, I'll be good.
That's it for general fund then?
Sure. Yep.
Sure. Okay. Fees and then water rates. Fees shouldn't be too hard, but then we'll get back into it.
And I tried to summarize the fee schedule. That's going to be, that's a separate tab in your binders. So in general, the fees that we present in the fee schedule, over the years, we've developed a break-even strategy with these.
What
And then
page, please?
It has its own tab at the very end.
Oh, thank you, sorry.
So some years ago, we developed a strategy for making sure that those fees are set for break even. And then policy has been that the departments are instructed to take their components that make up that break even, a dollar amount, add about 2%. And once that 2% increase breaks the $5 barrier, we then increase the fee that is charged. So this year, in the fee schedule, there were some changes, and I tried to note them. They're going to be designated in bold on each of the fee schedules. Page 5 of the zoning, page 7 of the clerks, page 11 of engineering. I'm going to zoom through these really fast. Page 12 of fire, page 16 of the marinas, 18 of the planning, and 25 of the wastewater treatment plant had experiences those bump ups due to the annual 2% increase. So those are just the annual fee increases. New fees are presented on page 9 of community services. They are proposing a new fee for running events. And there's also a new fee on page 20 of the public works.
Where's the running events fee?
Page 9,
I'm looking for it.
towards the bottom.
I still don't see it. I'm trying. Special event admin fee? Oh, run, walk, bike.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I want to follow up on a question a resident asked about
I have the hair.
block parties.
Right.
And there was also a question, and I don't know if the city attorneys had a chance to look into the question of why there was a very high insurance cost for that as well. Has anyone had a chance to follow up with that yet?
Suzanne and I have not had a chance to fully discuss all of that. We have been wrapped up kind of with this, so focusing, we do feel very strongly, or at least confident on our $250 block party fee, because it does cover time and equipment and other aspects or components of that. But as for the insurance question, that's something that Suzanne and I are still kind of working through and talking about.
Is there, is the 250, how long a period of time does that cover? Is that like, if it was 4 hours, it's 250, and if it was an 8 hour, it would be 500? Or is it, given that there seems to be a time piece engaged in that, I just wondered.
I'm waiting. For
Everybody have a
quick page
2 hour
number.
block party and your prices go down? That's what I'm.
Where is the fee for this that we're talking about? That was my question as well, so, which, I know it's 250, but I can't
I
find
don't
it.
even know which department that's in.
I believe it'd be on the left.
Or maybe if you can't tell us now.
Yeah, we can
maybe-
find out
If you
later.
could please let us know.
Yes.
That's a question, that would be helpful, whichever department that is.
And I understand about the time and equipment, but that's one that I would like to consider revisiting, not being 250.
Non-community event street, page 24th from the bottom.
Page 20?
Closures, i.e. private street parties. It's under Public Works.
Oh, you made fast work of that, Jess.
I can read real fast. Page 20, other charges, non-community event. It's the fourth from the bottom, fourth category, just above the two bolded ones.
Other questions on the fee schedule? Commissioner Bonzo?
This is just a clarifying question. The special event admin fee for free run, walk, bike events, that's just like $25 to $35 per event, correct? Or is that per, I just want to make sure that's not per participant.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, that's correct. It's just $25 per event, and that's just to cover admin costs for processing that and directing it through the different departments that have to handle that.
Great, thanks, John. That's what I figured, but just wanted to make sure.
Commissioner Hanley?
So just clarification on the block parties. It is considered, use of the right of way. So that it's actually part of the city code, and it covers a 24-hour period. So there's no hourly type of rate at this point, obviously. But that's essentially the fee that's covering, is using the right of way.
I'm just, to the question of how to make it a little more feasible for residents to have block parties, which I think we are interested in encouraging, and needing to understand what that would mean, or, alcohol, those kind of things, trash pickup. Maybe we, I think, I wonder if there's a way that we could use, understanding that if there's something in the charter, it sounds like, so then, or some kind of code, so then is there something we can do to help move around that while still respecting the limits that need to be there?
And we do waive the fee when it's national. I believe it's called National Night Out. I think there's a more technical term for that, or more general term for that, but we do waive it for that and trying to encourage, communities, and neighborhoods to have their block parties during that time. The alcohol use is a different factor that we do have parameters, around. We do have an application packet for that, and I do not have it in front of me, which may have some of this information listed as well.
That would be great. If you don't mind sending that to the commission along with the National Night Out date. I mean, that could be enough to defer to say, hey, this is the one time a year when it's free. What comes to mind for me is we have quite a bit of money we put in a promotional fund, and this is different but similar to me.
And the promotional fund is something I'm actually exploring on creative funding for that as well. We don't have a solid plan for that, but obviously that's something they could apply for.
Yep. And not like I would say they would apply for this. My point was that we have gotten creative before with certain types of events. And I understand these are private homeowner events, but I would agree that they add to the character and placemaking of our community, and something that I would like to support. Other questions, comments on fees? Commissioner Bonzel?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. And looking closer at this, it seems that, so on the right-hand side of this spreadsheet here, we have in the second column from the right, the break-even fee. And maybe I'm misreading this, but generally the break-even fee, I mean, according to city policy, is very close to what the actual fee is, or identical. But it looks like for the non-community event in the street, for a street closure, our proposed fee is $250, and it was for fiscal 21 as well. But it says that the break-even fee is $125. So I mean, I don't know if there's maybe clarification on that that could make sense of that, but like even just getting it down to $125, cutting it in half, I mean, that would be great, right? Like that's an expense that an individual host of an event could realistically bear without like some kind of serious financial cost to them, right?
Mary, did you have any further information on that, or
No.
either one of them have? I would actually, Public Works, I believe, came up with these fees, I want to say. Thank you. So,
Scott or Mick, do you guys have any input on that fee? Yeah, I believe the engineering probably
Thank you.
processes it.
We so rarely get actual feedback about our fees from the public, so when we do, it's good to take another look.
This one here.
I believe the 125 is an error. So the $250 fee goes to, also part of that is Public Works puts out barricades and brings them to the site and takes them off, so the fee goes to cover that as well. So, and then this past year, National Night Out was not sponsored by the police department. It may be next year, so there was no National Night Out this year. So I think that's why there was some heartache over the cost of the block party. So.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And I would just say I kind of agree with, I agree with my colleagues that maybe it makes sense to reduce or waive or eliminate or change the way that we do that fee in some way. Because, I mean, block parties are great, and I would love to see more of them in Marquette. It does seem like a pretty steep fee.
Mr. Henley?
The only question I had was about the short-term rental thing. That is they only have to do it once, correct? They don't have to yearly reapply for a license?
Page 12, if anyone.
Yes, sorry, page 12. It's the 190, it's going to be increased to 190, but it's only a one-time fee, correct?
Towards the bottom, I see it.
I believe that is, Ian, a 3-year license, and they'd have to pay it every time they renew the license?
Is that the registration fee?
Yes.
Oh, it's one time only.
Have we ever looked into having them, like, I mean, no, we can't get money for having hotels in the city because we can't capture that, but we can capture a fee for the Airbnbs every year, could we not? I'm sure most cities would charge a yearly fee of that to have an Airbnb in their area, I would assume. Is that something we've looked into as a revenue source?
We have it at our end.
Mhm.
That would be something I could talk to the city attorney about. Going forward.
Absolutely.
Hold on, just got to make one more note here. Go ahead, Commissioner Mayor.
I honestly had a very similar thought looking at that, and I was kind of waiting to ask her just to see if it got brought up, which it did. I'm kind of surprised it's not yearly, but I also would be very interested in seeing what something like that could look like, if that's even possible. And I just wanted to add that there is additional support for that concept.
Commissioner Stonehouse at his
I
hand.
agree with that 100%. I mean, the state of Michigan will not allow us to put a tax, so to speak, on Airbnbs or related activities. activities. The city ought to be creative enough to come up with an inspection program that is vigorous and certainly assuring the highest degree of safety we can for the occupants of that facility. To which we will simply make sure we have a balancing of the funds when time comes.
Yeah, I think what you mean, at the same time, we don't want to be incurring more costs that we actually don't see a return. And that then prompts the question, do long-term rentals also have to pay only one time?
Correct.
Okay, so are there any fees that you're aware of within your jurisdiction that are annual, or are they all one
With the
time?
rentals, they're not annual. The inspection fees are every 3 years. And then the registration fees are only when the property is purchased.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bonzo?
Yeah, I just want to express support for that concept, and I actually think that while we generally have a break-even philosophy with these fees, that it would be sort of nice to potentially actually generate some net revenue from an annual, short-term rental registration, maintenance fee or something like that. And actually, it would make a lot of sense logistically, because I believe we inspect short-term rentals annually, correct, as opposed to the long-term rentals, right?
Short terms are still on a 3-year basis.
Oh, okay, they're on a 3-year basis. Okay, but also it could potentially, one thing I was thinking about is that this could potentially help address an issue that some residents have raised, which is that there are perhaps some people who applied for and received a short-term rental permit right at the beginning and are just sitting on it because they don't want one in their neighborhood, right? So if you had to pay an annual fee, theoretically people could still just eat that cost every year, but it might reduce that problem while also generating some net revenue for the city that we could actually do something with. So I think it's a good idea.
Commissioner Mayor?
And I would just add, I think for the short-term rental, that would be great. For the long-term rental, even looking at like a yearly thing, that could potentially offset the cost. That could potentially, those costs could be transferred to the long-term tenants or residents. So that aspect of this, I don't think we would want to look at. Okay.
Commissioner Hanley?
I agree with that. I actually was only looking at the short-term portion of this, just to stop, it's another stop gate from, obviously we have a limit in the city of how many you can have at this point, but it's another thing to I don't want to put any more preclusions on people living in long-term rentals in this city, but I think a short-term rental, this is where we could possibly make some profit at this point.
Anything else on rates?
Coming state legislation is going to kill it all anyway.
I was going to say, this might be a good time to bring up public awareness, the fact that the short-term rental legislation battle is still being fought, and that people might stop thinking about it. So just keep in mind that we might lose local control over that issue and continue to talk to people about it.
We will be paying the state for everyone we have.
Thank you, Sean, for that reminder. Grim reminder. All right, let's move on to water rates.
If I can interrupt for just a second, one thing we do have to be careful about, and while this typically applies to utilities, we can't do something that would constitute a tax. And so saying we're going to charge extra fees to short-term rentals could in theory be considered a tax. And there's some pretty well settled litigation on that. And if it would qualify as a tax, we're going to get sued, we're going to lose. So we need to be very careful about raising revenue in a situation like that. It's one thing to cover our expenses, but that's something we have to be very careful about. If we're going to charge fees, those fees have to be related to the expenses of carrying out that program, not raising revenue, general revenue for the city.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Recreational access fee.
I was going to say Lakeshore Boulevard usage fee. Sorry. We put in a toll booth. Okay, let's move on to water rates. Where is this one at in our packet?
It's a special.
What page?
That's next.
Oh, it's down here in the back somewhere.
Is it in here or no?
We have a PowerPoint for us.
Okay,
Saving the best for last.
right? You guys have been so excited for this. Okay, so what we plan to cover today is obviously water rates, but it's also revisiting the water rate study that was presented to the commission. I do believe there was something presented in 2018 initially, when the study was completed, and then there was an update, I believe, in 2020, and here we are. And so my understanding of the backstory really is there was a rate freeze last year due to COVID. So that did kind of change things, and they've adjusted the model as appropriately. And we are going to kind of go through, I don't want to say justification of a rate increase, but where we are and the need for an increase or for some sort of change. So looking at the rate composition and what makes up our rates right now. And obviously we are aware that there's two parts to our rates. We have a fixed fee, which is that readiness to serve fee, and then also the commodity rate or the usage, which is tied to how much you use in a household, and whereas the readiness to serve is a fixed fee no matter what, and that covers that infrastructure that we have. So your readiness to serve fee is incurred by the need to serve customers. It's the ability to have that infrastructure ready and available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. 365 days a year, obviously. And then it's not dependent on the utility use, because we cannot stop maintaining that system. It's there for you. It's ready to use at any time. I hope we're seeing the pattern. Not that you guys didn't understand this already. And these revenues from the customers must cover these costs. There are certain costs in there that are there, and we incur every single year based off of just having that system. So hence why it is a fixed fee. It doesn't go away. And then we go into, obviously we said usage, and which includes our total bill. I kind of covered a lot of this readiness to serve, this fixed charge. Some of those things that get included in there are those bond fees. Fire protection system needs are in there. I think that was a question that we had from a commissioner. And any of that existing infrastructure, anything we put into the infrastructure itself. So that's not treating the water, that's not operating the pumps, that is for the physical infrastructure that's there. And that usage fee obviously is based off of the price per volume that's used. It reflects, again, I said, those costs of operating, treating, and getting the water to you, if that makes sense. Please stop me at any point, I think, if I'm missing something. And jump in anytime, Mark, as well.
Just a quick clarification, we're talking about water, sewer, and storm.
Yes,
so
thank you.
Not just water.
Yes, thank you. That as well, yes. So it comes to why are these rate increases needed? Obviously, we're talking about things that we already know. We have our inflation that's coming in. Things are costing more. And these plants and services are operating all the time. So there's constant wear and tear, there's constant need, there's constant operations. What's interesting is the trend that's happening right now across all communities is the usage is going down. We have those conservation, increases. We are using things that are more efficient with water usage, and it's just happening. And then also, obviously, last year we had COVID that impacted some of our larger users. Even though smaller users such as residentials were home, the larger users were done. They stopped operations, industries stopped, commercial usage stopped as well. So what you see here is actually pretty indicative of where we are with our usage and what we project out for our usage going on beyond. This is conservative, I believe. We model everything off of being very conservative, and we're saying that, hopefully based off of last year, that's the low. And so, as you can see here, we started even in 2014, we had a huge high, and you can just see it starting to go down. And then obviously COVID was in there as well. As I mentioned, inflation, this does have an impact on it. Things cost more, cost of living is there, things are more expensive. Pretty self-explanatory on that. Our infrastructure funding, the current rates are barely covering the costs that we have right now and the needs that we have and the debt service that we've already incurred. So I know that there was some past history there as well, and not having enough to cover those costs. We are slowly making that up, but we're still not there yet. The other thing is some of the debt that we are incurring right now doesn't cover the life of the infrastructure that's available, that's there. So if you think about it, we're taking out a bond on something that has the bond is 15 years or 20 years, and the actual asset that's funding is only there for, let's say, 10. It's not wise, it's not smart, and we should really, best practice would be finding a different way to fund that, and that would be building up some of those reserves so that we can be purchasing those assets using available funds versus bonding. And I think that there's actually a legitimate explanation right there on a certain asset, the filtration membranes for the water. Only last 7 years, and we bond for those, and I believe the bonding.
It's 10.
10 years is the bonding.
Yeah, we're 1 year away from having to replace those membranes, and we're gonna be pulling out the old membranes, putting them in the landfill, and we're still gonna be making a bond payment for 3 years with interest. And then we're gonna be starting to pay a new bond payment on the new membranes that are only gonna last 7 years. And they have to be replaced because we don't have the cash to pay cash for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we are.
So we talk about the road millage, and many times our street projects cover the infrastructure underneath, and those are covered with road dollars, with water and sewer funding, sorry, even though it's a road project. That road millage will not cover the actual water, sewer, stormwater infrastructure underneath. So we do have to think of that separately, and that's also when we talk about wanting to accomplish road projects, we also impact water and sewer funds, which will impact our rates as well. So the impact on the city debt and the city budget. We all know that maintaining our infrastructure is necessary, and it's in many cases it's mandatory, and delaying that indefinitely is not something we can be comfortable with leaving this room. So projects can be paid for with rates or through other city funds, obviously. However, raising rates would significantly affect that already impacted general fund. So that's really the only other way. So if we don't raise these rates and we have these infrastructure needs that we are required to do or need to do, we would have to look elsewhere, and that would ultimately come from our general fund, which I believe has been done in the past on almost an emergency basis. So that's what happens if we don't fund these projects with rate increases. So really, what's the plan? We're talking about these rate increases here. So current residential rates, we are trying to make this a generalized term so that we can all understand it. This is a typical household meter size. So we're looking at a fixed charge of $8.93. This is what's current for water. Sewer is $9.23, and then your stormwater, depending on your size, we said our average is, I believe, less than
the lower.
yeah, the less than a fifth acre, which is $5.51. Your variable charges go from $8.10 per 1,000 gallons, $14 per 1,000 gallons for sewer. And then if we look at what we're proposing then.
And this is per month, correct?
Per month, yes. Oh, sorry, we're going to look at what our average bill is right now, currently. We stand at $128.66. That is including fixed rates and variable based off of, is it a household? I'm sorry.
So that's based off a 4-person household using about
5,000.
Yes, thank you.
kilogallons per month.
And that's from a survey that was done by the city of Escanaba that they update every year, and they try to keep everything apples to apples. So those costs right there do not include stormwater, because a lot of communities don't have a stormwater fee.
And as you can see how we compare with our surrounding communities, Ishpeming does have an automatic 5% yearly increase built in. So the 10-year plan that was presented and was adjusted in order for fiscal year 21 to have no increase due to COVID looks like this. So originally there was a 5-year plan presented, which is pretty typical, and it was extended out to kind of stretch that out amongst 10 years to hopefully lessen that impact. Now, let's just say that when you put it into percentage perspectives, it seems very scary and very alarming. So I don't like to always focus on this, especially when you're looking at stormwater increases close to that 15%. So let's see what it looks like in dollars. So in dollars, We'll focus on the 4-person household right here. Where we stand is the 2021, the current year charges per month is about averaging $128.66. What we're proposing with the rate increases based off of the percentage that you just saw, it will be $141.11, so that's about $12.34 monthly increase, or 41 cents per day, about less than $150 per year increase. Did I do the math correctly?
And that's for all three combined.
Those are all three
That's,
combined.
Sean, did you include the stormwater on
Stormwater.
that? Because the numbers I sent you had included just the water and sewer.
I apologize.
Then this would just be water and sewer.
Yeah, that's just for the water and sewer, so
apologize.
then there would be the increase.
That would
for the-
explain then, $134 for the average bill on this slide, so.
Here we go.
Yeah,
Yes,
that would include that one.
thank you.
I'm not following. I believe you. I'm just trying to figure it out.
So if we go back to this slide, this includes just water and sewer, it does not include stormwater.
Okay.
If we looked out here, we will now see what it is included with stormwater.
Okay, so instead of 1234, it's what?
1230,
Do the math real quick.
stormwater increase would be 15% of
551.
$525. Is it $4.78 increase? No, sorry. $6.35 increase, or not increase, but total. So that's minus 551, so it's less than $1 increase.
That's what the stormwater, the 15% increase is less than $1.
How?
Typical lot in the city.
Because it's at 551, the stormwater is only open.
Right.
Okay. All right, continue on. Sorry.
Thank you.
Study it later.
That's fine. So here you see what that 10-year average bill projection is, including that stormwater. So instead of the $128 currently, it's $134 this year if you include that stormwater in there. So instead of the annual increase of the annual, I'm sorry, the monthly total of 141 without stormwater, it would be 147. So we can just add $6 per month.
Just to jump in real quick, you can see our projections out. If we go back to the comparable communities, it's going to be years before we're at the level that they're at now, and there's no way they're going to be able to maintain the rates they do. I mean, Ishmael, you can see, has an automatic 5% increase, so they're going to be far beyond, what we're at even 5 years down, the line with rate increases.
Does everybody have?
I think I got it now. I mean, I understand
sorry.
now. Thank you. Yep.
Oh, we can share these, so you can jump back at any time for yourself. All right, so looking at what does that really mean for us, and what does this really do to our rates? Where is it just coming in, we're spending it right away? That's not the intended plan. What we're seeing here, what does that rate cover? Currently, as I mentioned, we don't have, and as Mark jumped in and said as well, we don't have that cash to pay for some of those improvements that are needed and not necessarily appropriate to bond for. So what you see here is what we're covering, and the existing revenue covers what we look like, what our operations and maintenance and our existing debt in there. So when we look and project out, what we're trying to cover is some of that newer debt service, and then also looking at trying to have a reserve in order to pay for some of these things, which is what you're seeing as rate-funded CIP. So that's building up a reserve in order to accomplish some of these projects without having to bond. So when you look at that, you're trying to build up something and not necessarily just be covering paycheck to paycheck.
And you can see, fiscal year 2021, we're basically at that level where our rates are covering basic operations and maintenance and debt service, and those figures are going to far outclass, what we're taking in revenue if we don't take some action.
And that's for water. So we still have sewer and stormwater also. So if you look at some of these targets that we try to obtain in the general fund, we talk about having enough fund balance to cover a certain period of time with our reserves. What we're looking at here is trying to build that up. So we also have that 90 days, which is something that we're comfortable with if all of a sudden everything just stopped. So that's allowing us to build it up. And again, as you start seeing it, we're not going to get there in the next few years even. So it's looking long-term. Go ahead. So looking at the sewer side, obviously we're still the same. We're not quite where it would be comfortable in best practices in looking at being able to fund, capital improvement projects while using our reserves for those. So if you look at similar here, we're not there, but we are trying to get there with these rate increases. Again, looking at that 90-day mark as a benchmark, and that is something that, obviously, it was not the 120 days that we talk about with general fund. We're looking more at the 90 here. Stormwater, again, another chart to tell you where we're trying to get. We're in, some, I don't want to say a better position here, but as you can see, we also have a reason why we're trying to build up what we're anticipating in the future.
That's it.
And that would be
the 90-day for stormwater.
Trying to get to that 90-day. So again, it requires a rate increase, and there's been conversations talking about, what we can be doing for some of our, lower income households, and we do have resources that we offer and direct households to if we have any financial issues, and those are things that Mary, you can touch on. And we are cognizant of that, and we do like to be able to work with our families on those.
Yeah, absolutely. And over the last year especially, the funding sources for those that are having difficulties paying their utility bills, the funding sources don't come to the city, they come to those outlying agencies. In particular, the Community Action Agency received millions. And to the point that they're actually contacting us for, who are some of your residents that we can help. Give them our information so that we can help them out. And they not only help with utilities, but they also help with rental as well. So our office definitely defers a lot of those situations out to those outlying agencies or churches. Now it's even to the point that there's so many resources out there for them that we do that before we start working with them on a payment plan.
And I am a past experience with water rate models. This is very much consistent with what I've seen in other areas with other consultants, with other communities. Yes, there's a fixed component, and that tends to be higher, obviously, than your variable component. So this is in line with what I've seen elsewhere, and what is a standard practice across many communities.
And just to clarify before I go down the line here on water rates, this is worked into the budget as presented, correct?
Correct.
These rate increases.
Correct.
Okay. Commissioners, questions, discussion? Commissioner Bonzel?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thanks for that information. And I believe you said that you can send the slideshow to us after the meeting.
Certainly.
Awesome. Thank you. I guess my biggest concern, I don't think anybody would dispute that we need rate increases, that the current system that we have, there's too many dollars of maintenance and replacement and things that, and not enough dollars chasing them. Like, that's a central problem we're in. And I want to say, I really like the fact that when you look at the financial plans, once we get out past the next few years, we're factoring in essentially sort of like what Ishpeming is doing with a small, actually significantly lower than 5% annual increase to just kind of keep pace with inflation and increasing costs and things like that. And I think probably if the city had been always doing that from the day that this infrastructure was built, we wouldn't be in this situation, right? So thank you for that. But my concern, I have two concerns. Number one, and this is actually a question for you, Mary. So there are all these resources that are currently available for lower income residents who are maybe getting behind on their water the sources, I think a lot of the money that like CAM received, for example, is kind of like a one-time like COVID-19 relief infusion. So can you talk about maybe like some of the sources for that funding? Is this something that's going to be available, you know, for years to come, or is this just kind of like a lump sum of money that, you know, is in excess of what we need right now, but a few years from now that may not be true? Could you just describe that a little bit?
That one in particular is going to be more of a short-term solution, but over the years we have had to use, we have sourced our residents out to the DHHS, churches. St. Vincent is also very good at helping to cover that. And quite honestly, our internal payment plans do work when we do get our customers on the phone when they're in situations like this.
Okay, thank you. And that's good to know. I still do have concerns about focusing primary, as in, you know, the Reftel study recommended when we initially in 2018, you know, we were presented with the commission was presented with a couple of different options that, you know, we could focus primarily on the fixed charge increases, or we could do across the board increases that are more focusing and leaning on that per 1,000 gallon rate for water and sewer. And at the time, my understanding is that the commission sort of decided that we wanted to go with Reftel's recommendation to focus more on the fixed charge increases. And I understand the rationale behind that it's a more consistent revenue stream, given that, you know, the usage is more responsive to price increases, and it's just going down as time goes on anyway because of increases in efficiency. So I understand that argument, but it does seem like a less equitable or fair way to approach it, given that, you know, like lower income folks, or maybe people who are, like, I think about a lot of people that I talked to when I was knocking doors running for the city commission in 2019 were older couples who had a fixed source of income. Many of them were low income. They were relying entirely on Social Security for their income. They didn't have a pension or anything like that. They didn't have much in savings. And they owned a small house and a small plot of land, and they already in 2019 were telling me, like, gee, you know, my water bills are just like really killing me right now. And it's not they were necessarily behind, but like they were making their payments, but it was a struggle. And that's just with the increases that the commission approved in, I believe, fiscal 19 and not even fiscal 20, I don't think yet, so had hit yet. So I think that, you know, and there's data to back that up, right? That we have seen a significant increase in shutoff notices and shutoffs performed from 2018 to 2019. In 2020, we had the moratorium, but if shutoffs and shutoff notices had continued at the pace we saw through the first 2 months of the year, it would have been even higher than in 2019. So that's my concern, is that I want to make sure that we're structuring these rate increases that need to happen in as fair and equitable a way as possible, that we're thinking about the lower income members of our community, and also that, like, we have resources for them to turn to. And so that's top of mind for me as we're going through this process. So just wanted to note that.
Other commissioners? Pro Tem Hill?
Thank you. Thank you for the information. I am, it is certainly also in terms of knocking doors, and also in terms of what emails and information I hear from other residents, that the increased water rates are maybe, yeah, they're making the payments, but they're having to choose now to do other things. So the national recommended amount of money that you spend on a monthly or annual basis on utilities, you know, you're supposed to spend 20, 30% on rent or mortgage. There's a recommended amount, which is 10% for all utilities. We already pay, even in Marquette, we pay higher electric bills than the rest of the country. And I just pulled up a study, roughly the average across the entire country for water bills is roughly $100 a month. That's the national, roughly the national average. It's anywhere from, there's communities apparently where it's only $30 a month, Memphis, Tennessee, to Seattle, Washington, where it's $225. So there's a big range, so we're above the national average. And I question and really raise a red flag to comparing ourselves on utility rates, both electric and water, to other communities around us when we pay literally UPCO and Elder Delta have some of the highest electric rates in the entire United States. So we're looking at, and poor Ishpeming is paying, $78 more a month than the national average. So the whole UP is suffering from the lack of investment that has been made in our utility structure. So, and part of that, as you noted, is that our technology is changing. And I know I just put in a 1.4, I think, gallon flush toilet, because why spend the money on this? So the technology is going to keep taking us to a place where we're going to use less and less. This is true for water, this is true for electricity. So I do think that it would be worthwhile to take a step back and consider if we can find outside funds to support looking at other ways of doing this. For example, it is, I understood that actually water use is driven by fire protection, not by residential watering your lawn and putting water in the shower. Fire protection requires certain pressures in order to be effective, and there's multiple studies, including one for the Wisconsin Public Service Commission, that shows how approximately 20% of the costs come from fire protection. And if you allocate water rates according to property value, because that's directly tied to fire protection, then you can have rates that start to get at some of the ability to pay. In addition, because it is unquestionable that having fixed charges hurts low-income folks who are in fact using less water than high-income folks. And so I would strongly encourage looking around to find ways to get part of the conversation that is going on around our country and around our state, particularly in Michigan, because of what happened. There's actually a lot happening around water rates because of what's happened in Flint and Benton Harbor. So we could be part of solving this problem of this, the technology. We're having trouble raising the money to pay for the infrastructure because people are using less water. That's just going to continue. So how do we find a way to change our rates? Would it be around the fire protection charge? Could it be around other ways of allocating these expenses across potential revenue sources? I really want to strongly encourage staff to look into those opportunities because I know they exist. I do also want to say I finally appreciate how serving customers and making sure they have a place to go to when they're not able to pay their bills. That's a valuable resource. But if you're to the point where you're not paying your bills, the stress and the headache of that, let's avoid that in the first place by setting our rates at a way or finding the resources to help us set the rates so that residents don't have to endure that stress.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Stonehouse?
I think what I heard from the pro tem was that we should be transferring money from the general fund to subsidize rates. Because, we don't have unicorns. We don't have things that fall from the sky and give us money. We don't have magical solutions to extremely difficult engineering plans. I would also take some exception to the suggestion that we lower our firefighting capability, and which in turn drives insurance rates up, which affect the same people that are trying to buy water. So it's a complicated system. And when we take national averages, we're comparing systems in Tennessee that are barely functional with the cost of water per month necessarily with ones that might be somewhere else that are highly functional. So we need to be very specific when we begin to look at potential solutions and we begin to look at the methodologies that we might use to explore them. And when we're comparing using the city of Marquette and what we're paying for Board of BLP rates with UPCO, now we're getting way out of the field. Nobody in the city of Marquette uses UPCO. So we need to focus our energies and our effort on what we can do within the city. And certainly a technology application is very important. Can we do things better? Can we do things smarter? Are there other systems that we can use? But I do appreciate certainly your suggestions. Thank you.
Briefly.
I never use the term general fund. Lansing charges fire protection rates. Wisconsin has regulated water utilities, all 582 utilities in Wisconsin. Here's a number for you, not a unicorn, not a rainbow. 21% of the use is coming from fire protection. There are other ways of doing this, and this is the second time you've brought up the idea that I'm using unicorns and rainbows, Fred. I am insulted by that, because there are communities that are looking to take care of their residents and are making sure that the bills are being paid in a way that is fair to all members of the community, and not just thinking that the way that we've done things in the past is going to work in the future. It's not.
I think there's room for some common ground in looking into that, especially through our strategic and master planning processes. But I would encourage both commissioners to approach each other with a little more professionalism moving forward. Thank you very much. Other commissioners? Commissioner Bonzo.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. The second concern that I have with the way that our current financial plans look for our water, sewer, stormwater funds is that we're operating under this, this goal of building up a 90-day fund balance. And so I'm just curious I understand it was stated that this is sort of the best practice in the sense that like the 120-day fund balance is the best practice for our general fund. Is that 90-day fund balance goal that the commission established a couple of years ago flexible at all, or is that based upon actual amount of dollars we want to spend in the future on different capital projects? And would it be possible, my understanding is that Reftelis is not on retainer, but that we could reach out to them with questions, and would it be possible for them to present us with 10-year financial plans that would hit a 30-day or a 60-day benchmark for that fund balance? So, thank you.
Typically in my past experience, especially when we talk about having some sort of reserves, that reserve that 90 days is actually a very nice cushion so that you don't see more volatile rates year to year. So that while that is your best practice and you're saying that covers enough if something happens and you have to have expenditures for 3 months, here's what it does for you. Yes, but it also provides for some flexibility when there are those emergencies that occur. There are, unplanned, obviously, water and sewer breaks, or water and sewer main breaks. Certain things break within the system. It gives us that flexibility so that we have that without having to come every single year and revise the plan or spike in expenditures, which would cause a spike in revenue as well. So it does more than just have covering costs for 90 days. It does more than that, such as providing that cushion. So is it flexible? Yes, but would I recommend that based off of my experience? No, but I'm also not the CFO.
Some of the revenue bonds that we go out for too will require that there is a benchmark in the reserves.
I think these would be good questions. I'm hoping that we can have a work session with Reftelis, or if we decide to go with another similar provider that does the same service in the future, but I'm thinking a work session with the commission to talk us through. And we only approve a rate a year at a time. I guess I'm wondering how the city of Ishpeming even approved a 5% moving forward if their budget is approved annually, unless they did something unique there. I'm curious to see what that would look like for us.
I don't know if we should comment on the politics of Ishpeming.
Fair point.
Well said. Okay, so.
When we have this work session, could we please have an outside source who apparently would be more believable than myself that would present information regarding how these other cities are managing to change their rates so that they are not unfairly burdening folks who live on fixed incomes?
So I would hope that whatever study we do would look at some possible alternatives like we've discussed tonight. And I think looking at a variety of income levels or commercial versus residential or size of property or whatever that might be is something that I think I'd even mentioned to you yesterday, Karen. So absolutely, I think it's something we need to consider. I'm not sure if that's something Ref tell us is in their wheelhouse or not, but we can move forward and see. Do we have other questions on the water rates as they stand for the budget for fiscal year 22, which is coming quickly here? All hands went away. Commissioner Stonehouse.
Yeah, we're both waving here. I would challenge Mark to take a real look. You know, you've heard the commission being very concerned with the rate structure. You've also certainly heard opportunities for other communities and what they may be doing and other systems that might be available, other methodologies. Could we get a real look at what those possibly would be without going through the trouble of trying to get a consultant on board necessarily to talk to us, but from an in-house perspective of what's out there on the horizon? Not now, I'm not trying to
Just so I'm
push out a
clear,
spot on it,
what
but-
other communities are doing and how
but
they're
over
going about.
time, how other people are responding to the same challenges that we do. It's particularly in terms of the pointy edge of the stick being making sure that we're delivering the quality of water at the lowest possible point and keeping the working beast together.
I mean, I can look into that and do some research, certainly.
Thank you very much. I'd appreciate that. I think we all would appreciate that insight.
Commissioner Bonzel?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I would agree with that, that we should either if we can get a consultant to prepare a report for us, especially if those funds can come from elsewhere as opposed to from the city budget, that would be great. Or we can do it in-house. Either way is fine by me, but I do think that, you know, it's important that we all remember, like, this is part of this long-term plan, like we saw on the screen. And so, like, just the increases this year are significant for a lot of city residents, but it's going to continue. I mean, we're looking at the same increase next year, more or less the same the year after that. And again, after just 2 years of the old Rectelis plan, residents are already telling us we're hurting here. So I think that we need to find a way, at least by next fiscal year, by the time we're here a year from now having the same conversation, to structure these rate increases in a more equitable way that doesn't hit lower income residents as hard. That's just my standpoint. But I do hear you and respect you on the 90-day fund balance, and I appreciate you for providing that information.
And Commissioner Bonzel, you just mentioned something that reminded me. I got a press release from Governor Whitmer's office today that said there's quite a bit of funding available for some kind of water infrastructure. I don't know if we're going to qualify for that or
Lead
not.
pipes.
Lead pipes only?
Yes.
Yeah, which we don't have.
200 million.
Well, I didn't
Which
read them all.
we're,
Darn.
fortunately for us, we don't have.
Well, fortunately, but yep.
Yeah.
And Pro Tem, did you have something else?
Just letting everybody know that I'm sending the email that I sent to the city manager and assistant city manager earlier today that has the Michigan State University Institute for Public Utilities rate-setting course on water utilities that's coming up in 2 weeks, which is pretty soon, but also the information from Wisconsin and information from other entities. I believe we could probably find a comparable community in Wisconsin.
Anything else on the water, sewer, stormwater rates? John?
Yeah, I would just like to say, we did, do a 0% increase last year at the behest of this commission in consideration for the residents, but we do have very real costs and needs for this system, and this is a plan that was commissioned by the city commission, and we did set upon it. Future discussions can be had. We can take at least cursory looks into different structures and do what is, capable of what staff is capable of doing and looking into it. But if we just look at, what this actually means for our financial plans, this is an engineered study by people who do this for a living, more than, even we can do as a city. This is what we need for, operations and management and basic debt service. It's not even necessarily fund balance yet. Fund balance builds up towards the later end of this plan, I believe. This is what we need to keep our system running and operating at the high quality level we do right now. So just for your consideration for this fiscal year, I think other options could definitely be explored. We can discuss it in work sessions. We can look into various consultants. The Mayor Pro Tem has provided, like she said, several materials to us that we're starting to review right now and see what could be a viable option. Our first commitment is to, providing safe, quality water and reliable sewer, for our residents. And this is the plan that we need to do at the moment.
Yes, just to piggyback off that, we have to do something this year. And it is very clear in all of these graphs, we have to do something this year. So, and just for clarification on, what we need to be doing on researching other communities and what we're covering for our costs, we can certainly do that, but would that be more efficient and a better use of our time to really start talking to a consultant and bringing that back in front of the commission later, but earlier than where we are now in the budget process for next year? So something.
I would think that maybe we would review a work session to do either in the winter or spring.
Yes.
And it might be something that we even want to do a work session on the rate study or where we're at annually.
And and understand that rate studies, comprehensive rate studies, so not just revised current rate studies, but going back to the drawing board does take well over 90 days for a consultant to work through that. So we would be looking to start that quickly after the first of the year, if that's the direction that you're asking us to go.
Right, the cost of service, you have to identify what your costs are first, and then once you've identified what your costs are, then you can identify what is driving those costs. And as I said, I think our missed opportunity is particularly around fire protection and the ability to tier that according to property values. That could be a source of revenue that also would bring people more protection, not less.
And I'm not disagreeing with you.
So I'm
I'm
sorry, I hear that was
missed.
misunderstood, so I thought I would make it clear.
I understand. I do think that's a good idea, Pro Tem, but I don't think that that's something we can approve by next Monday for the proposed scheduling of the budget. But that or a variety of other income-based solutions would be something I'd be interested in looking at for the future. Commissioner Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to be clear. I totally appreciate, Sean and Karen, what you're saying. I mean, I just want to be clear, I don't think any of us disagree that, number one, we absolutely need to maintain safe water, sewer, stormwater, safe and effective water infrastructure in the city. And I don't think anybody's disputing that we need to take action starting this year. But I think moving forward, we need to have a discussion about the way in which we do that. There's more than one way to skin a cat. And when the original rate increases were approved by the commission back in fall of 2018 for the fiscal 19 year, it was not a unanimous vote. And I believe, if I'm correct in remembering this, that 5 of the current 7 commissioners were not on the commission at the time that we decided to go with this financial version of Ref Tellus's financial plan. Mm-hmm. So perhaps time to reassess and reevaluate with the new commission.
Anything else on water, sewer, stormwater rates? Okay. Anything, I probably should just get back to the agenda here. We'll have public comment, we'll have comments from the commission if anyone has any final things to say overall, and then city manager comments, but I just wanted to offer before we get to that point, if there's anything any other staff members wanted to say, or if you wanted to do that later, I'm not sure. Just making sure, didn't want to cut anyone off. Okay, we'll roll. Public comments, so we're on our second public comment session of the evening. Members of the public have 3 minutes to speak. Please approach the side podium, state your name and physical address. Move this timer.
Margaret Brum, 404 East Magnetic Street. I'm here to update the City Commission and thus the city residents on a program that is working, that is not currently costing the city any money. And the reason I mention this is a couple budget meetings ago, I made a suggestion to the city manager that they have a summit with all of the volunteer groups in town to make sure that information is available to all the people who might be negatively affected. Especially what I hear about water rates is, I was unaware that there was a large amount of money that was available for water rate payments. And again, that would be a simple thing to make people aware of. Back to my success story, about 7 weeks ago, the City of Marquette and the Superior Watershed Partnership teamed up and bought 4 tubes for cigarette recycling and placed them alongside various parts of the beach. There's a lovely picture of our city manager pointing at the first one installed, which is at the new beach park. I'm blanking on the name, the new beach park. I'm here to tell you that after 6 weeks, the city has paid nothing more into this program. The people we're recycling with TerraCycle pays for the postage, and as of last week, we exceeded 10 pounds of cigarette butts that have been collected in this area and shipped to the Illinois for recycling. Now, I knew there were 10 pounds of cigarette butts in the area. I just didn't know we could collect them, gather them, and ship them for a little bit of money. And in my SUV in the back, I've got grabber sticks, some of which were donated by local businesses. I've got rewards, again, some of which donated by local businesses. I've got all the tools that you need, so when anybody expresses an interest in participating, all they have to do is come see me Tuesday nights, Matson Park, 6 p.m. One of the current city commissioners has been dropping off cigarette butts at my back porch, which always makes my day start on a good note. But what I'm here to say, as you talk about these dramatically difficult budget decisions, I would encourage, again, the city management to reach out now to the volunteer groups and ask them to make sure that they give a list of what's available to the city residents through these groups, so that when the bad news hits, and I'm sorry, but this is going to be a year of bad news, when the bad news hits, you have volunteer groups and community funding and all the places that people should know they could go to help, but oftentimes they don't. So in conclusion, what you invested in 7 weeks ago, a minimal investment, has paid off in 10 pounds of the worst type. If Mark's still here, he can assure you the worst type of debris in the wastewater plant is cigarette butts. So thank you for your initial investment.
Anyone else for public comment? Going once, going twice. Public comment is now closed. All right, brings us to comments from the commission. We'll start with Commissioner Hanley. Go down the line if you have anything you want to say about anything at all, really.
I will be brief. I just want to thank Mary and the rest of the staff for all the work you've done to give us this budget. You've done a great job of showing us exactly everything in every way we can, and the work that you guys have put in to try and make it to where we're not using as much of the general fund as we need to is definitely noted by everyone here on the commission, I can imagine. But I want to thank you very much for all the work that you've been putting in every day to make sure that all this gets done. Pro Tem Hill?
Thank you. To address one of the comments that came up in public comment, if you aren't aware, there's a service called 211, and if you call 211, that is the idea. You will reach a real human being, not a voicemail endless trail, and that person will be able to recommend to you which social service agency will provide a certain service. So it is a statewide service and is staffed by people who have pretty much heard it all. So if whatever your issue might be, it is a place where you can find someone who could help you. So if you weren't aware of that. And also the social service agencies have had sort of resource fairs in the past that I have attended both in person, and there was one last year on Zoom. So there is an opportunity to, those folks do come together, and I'd be happy to share those resources further. And on, there was something I wanted to say about budget, and I don't remember what it was. So I will just hold it until Monday. Thank you.
Commissioner Mayer?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll also be brief. I would also like to thank all of our wonderful staff for answering, I don't even know how many questions at this point today, and over the last several meetings we've had, and having so many answers readily available. I can tell maybe you anticipated some of the questions and kind of planned ahead how readily available some of them seemed, but either way, I appreciate it. And I also want to just say that I really love how much this commission has a great open dialogue and how much we're all willing to throw out ideas and discuss things, and I think that's really representative of how diverse this commission is. And it's a positive thing. It's just important to maybe sometimes remember that, and that all of us kind of look at things a little differently sometimes. Thank you.
Commissioner Stonehill?
Well, I too would like to thank the staff. You guys have done a magnificent job of pulling this budget together, of making hard decisions, great recommendations, and guiding us through it so we can make the final decision. Thank you. And thanks, again, all of the staff for what you've done and the tremendous support you've given us. I'd also like to thank our commission, too, because of the great work you've done. And as Commissioner Mayer said, we're passionate about what we believe in, and we're passionate about the city, and we're passionate with what facets we may have and wish to contribute to the overall discussion. And that's important to be, because if we're not passionate, what are we doing here? We don't belong to be in these seats. So I want to thank you for that passion, and thank you for the ability to work together and to try and reach the common ground we need to have to finally approve the budget. Thank you.
Commissioner Bonsall?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'll echo those sentiments from Commissioner Mayer and Commissioner Stonehouse that I thought we had a very fruitful discussion tonight. I feel that we were able to, I think it was probably clear to all of us and to anybody watching that we were a little bit maybe at a loss on how to move forward on some of these things at the beginning of the meeting, but by the end I feel like we're coming towards consensus, which will hopefully give staff a sense of direction. So thank you to staff for facilitating a great meeting. Thank you to the mayor and to my colleagues. Just a couple of quick things. It is Glass Recycling Week, I believe, so a reminder about that as we always do every month. Yeah, please make sure to put out your glass recyclables and only your glass recyclables this week if your waste collection date hasn't already come around. And I also just want to say thank you to our staff for all the hard work you're putting in. And I think particularly on the utility rate increases, this is something that, and on the capital projects, these are not easy decisions. And I think that it's just important, I just want to say that I think it's really important to be thinking about how this is going to impact people's everyday lives in the city of Marquette, how people are going to perceive the work that we're doing on the commission and the decisions that we're making in context, and be thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead about, okay, we may be going for a road or street millage. How do we maximize the success of that? And other things of that nature. So I think it's important that we're keeping that in mind and thinking in the long term as well. As tempting as it is to just think about, gee, how do we get into the black on this year's budget? How do we just get the rate increases that we need this year to be able to move forward? We need to be thinking in the long term as well. So thank you.
Commissioner Davis?
Ms. Brum talked about this is kind of a bad news kind of a year, and it is hard. I kind of have sitting here with a pretty heavy heart, knowing how the balance that we're trying to strike between maintaining the city services that we have and the cost of living. And, we talk about low income or affordable housing, but it's really the cost of being able to live in Marquette. And I think I can see it. Everyone's kind of struggling with how we all know those people where another $1,000 of their year in utility costs is going to be very difficult when their salaries or their hourly wage doesn't increase. And so I just want to acknowledge, and I think Commissioner Bonsall just said that, how does this affect everyday lives? Our city manager did a TV 10 interview recently. I don't know who else saw it. I did. And she, one of the things she said was how hard our city staff is working. And this is one of those situations where it's really evident that it's not easy to cut the budget. It's not easy to talk about rate increases like this, but we're doing what we can. And as Commissioner Stonehouse said, it's because we're all passionate. So thank you.
Well, I have to say this is the most difficult city budget I've been a part of since I came on in 2017, and we've got a new city manager who's handled it very well. And I just wanted to say that I really like this new and improved process where we had a work session and then 2 budget hearings. I mean, it may be flexible and need to change in the future, but I think you did a nice job of summarizing the top level items, everything that kind of stayed the same. We left it as is, and I think that worked really well. So thank you for keeping it high level and getting us through the most difficult and important topics for us to be discussing, because I know in the past we've really gotten into the weeds on small, purchases and those things that it makes it difficult to have perspective as to what the big changes are for the coming year. And I think we did a good job of staying at that high level. Wanted to thank staff for your time and energy, blood, sweat, and tears poured into this. I know we're not quite past the finish line yet, but it feels like we're getting closer, and I really appreciate it. And thank you to the commission for asking thoughtful and important questions on this budget for our residents. And I agree that more future planning will need to happen, and we'll continue to work on that. All right, that's it from me. City Manager, any comments?
Just a very sincere thank you and appreciation for all the comments. And, Mayor Pro Tem Hill, we've had some conversations, and you've been sharing some research that you have done and that you continue to do. And, we do take that to heart, and we have been spending a great deal of time looking into that. And we do look forward to the conversations about the future of water rates. So I thank you for that, and I thank all of the commission for that. And, Commissioner Davis mentioned that there was an interview on TV 10, and it was the question was, what's the common misconception with local government? And the answer really, focused on that we're all human, and the conversation tonight was very evident of that. We are human, and we do feel, and we do want to feel for all of our residents, and we do, and that is something that is difficult. So thank you for recognizing that. But we're here to listen and put in all of the blood, sweat, and tears that we have for this. So thank you to the staff, and thank you to the commission for that. We will be following up on quite a few things. The short list really revolves around Brownfield, Ldfa, Lakeshore Boulevard. There are some smaller fee questions, which we can get some answers to. And then following up on the slides that we presented as well. So if I did miss something, please feel free to send me an email so we can get that out. And looking at scheduling that next work session, I would assume, so we can talk about that. And lastly, thank you to Margaret for her cigarette butt initiative. It started off small and is really kicking off, so I really appreciate that gusto on that, and I wish that everybody really had some interest in this budget like she has taken so far. So thank you. And that's really all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Great. We are adjourned at 6:57 p.m. 6:57. It's hard with a mask on. I want to know what they use.